How long had George been coaching you before he suggested that you include performance-enhancing drugs in your regimen?
We had a sit down conversation after about a good maybe 6 to 8 months from when he started coaching me. He says, this is what everybody does and this is what you should be doing. You will not get anywhere unless you do. And it was a case of no, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. It's not something I want to do. So that's where the conversation ended. He then started saying more about it and he's like, you're just wasting your time basically. If you don't take performance enhancing drugs, you're just wasting your time because everybody does it. And that's what you do as an elite athlete. I think this is the best way I can describe it, really. I kind of felt like I was becoming brainwashed. Started to just go with everything he was saying. And that's when things started to go wrong.
Hi there, welcome back to Good for the Hive, the weekly podcast where I get to sit down with inspiring individuals to share their life lessons and take a look at the question, what is a good life? Today's guest, Bernice Wilson, was all set to make a huge impact at the London 2012 Olympic Games. This dream was stripped from her when in 2011 she became the first British athlete to receive the maximum 4-year ban for doping. But don't you dare judge this book by its cover. We talk all about the dark arts that are going on behind the athletic scene, Bernice's abusive and controlling relationship with her coach turned partner, George Skafidis, and how she's managed to stay mentally strong throughout this whole ordeal. Bernice has moved on to the next chapter of her life and she is now training Britain's next generation of sprinters. This is Bernice's story. If you like the episode, please do hit the like button, and if you're new around here, do subscribe. The more likes and subs that we get on the channel help us to continue to attract inspiring guests just like Bernice to share their life lessons with you. Bernice Wilson, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to get into this with you. It's such an incredible story, the story that you have. But we'll start the podcast where we start all of our podcasts and ask you, what is a good life to you?
A good life to me is being happy within yourself and having all your family and friends around you. But I think it's just to make sure that you're content with everything, that you're happy within in your job, that you're not doing anything that you feel you don't want to be doing. But for me, it's definitely about family and friends and good health, I would say.
And are you currently living a good life?
I would say I am, yeah. I've got a good job, even though it's so busy. I've got, good family and friends, and I just enjoy, I think the older I've got, this is going to sound quite cheesy, but the older I've got, the more thankful and grateful I am, as a lot of us have. I've experienced bereavement and within a year now, because my mum passed away, and I think it, obviously that was a very difficult time for me, but it brings the whole family together. I'm just thankful for them, and thankful for good health for my family as well. And I would say I'm living a good life.
Good stuff. Now, as an elite athlete, when did you realize that you were better than the majority of the field that you were racing against?
I think it all started when I was a lot younger. So I would say when I was about 15 is when I actually realized, I think I'm not a bad athlete. I think I'm pretty good. That was my first international call up. But I first started running when I was 8 years old. I was actually too young to run, too young to compete. And my dad said, tell them that you're 9 years old. So I did. And I won my first race. I didn't think a lot at that time because I was obviously very young and I was doing other sports and everything like that. But when I got my first call up at 15 to run internationally, that's when I thought, hang on, I think I might be okay at this. But at the time I was still doing hockey for the county and netball for the county. But I felt that I lived in Boston, Lincolnshire, quite a small town. And I felt that I started become more well known and I started becoming more in the local papers and people started to recognize me more. And so I felt that I stood out more And this isn't to boast or anything like that, but I started to stand out more locally. And so that's when I thought, maybe I'm quite good, and I started getting good results. I did think maybe I can go somewhere with this, and it's what I enjoy doing, so I kept going.
So you received your first call up to Team GB at age 15. How does that happen? Is that a phone call? Was that an email back in the day? How did you get told that you were on the team?
Yeah, so I actually received a letter. So it was a letter that I received to run for England, and it was in Wales. So I was really, really excited, and I got this letter, and it was to do the 200 meters indoors. And at the time, yeah, I was 15 years old. And that's when I decided then that, okay, I can really go somewhere. And I decided not to do the hockey and the county netball and the county hockey anymore. I was really looking forward to it, and I was very, very nervous. I can't remember how I got on in the end, but I think I was in the top three. And yeah, and I thought, I can really go somewhere. And so I started taking everything a lot more seriously, because with my training, I was only training at the time about 3 times a week. I wasn't training for that long, really. I just started looking after my body a little bit more. I started watching what I eat a little bit more. I wouldn't say I was very, very strict, because I had a very big sweet tooth, and I still do. And so I just started taking it a little bit more seriously, and that's when I was starting to be recognized more as well. So yeah, yeah.
Have you still got that letter?
No, I don't think I do, actually. I don't think I have it anymore. But I always remember it was a very big moment for me and my family. And yeah, yeah. And that's when things started to get a bit more serious. But I still wanted to keep that fun element, because I feel that that's why you start in sport, really. Because when I started when I was 8 years old, it was like me and my brother did very well. We won our first, well, they called it then the flat race. I think it was about 60 meters. We won, and it was. I always remember we got these big cups, and it was fun then. So it was always, I was wanting to keep that fun element still, that enjoyment.
At what stage did you get faster than your brother?
I probably, I would say he was always faster than me, actually. I'm going to be honest.
Oh, really?
I would say at around maybe 16, maybe around 16, I was becoming a little bit more faster, a bit more stronger. But I would say he was very, very talented, and he was still able to beat me, to be fair. But that's when I started taking it a lot more seriously.
So how does it work after you get that letter? Do you ever say, Mum and Dad, you need to drive me to Wales in a couple of weeks? I need to do this. Or do you all meet in London? Or how does it work as part of Team GB at that age as well? Because you're still under 16.
At that age, because the thing is, you rely a lot on your parents, or guardians or carers. So for me, it was like I relied a lot on my parents, and they have to be in it 100% with you. So for me, it was a case of they drove me and my brother, who was competing at the time, everywhere. Literally, we was going to Scotland, we was going to Wales, we was just going to everywhere. So they literally drove me down, and it would be a case of staying in a hotel the night before, because competition was in Cardiff. So they actually drove me down. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of the competitions that I did, really. Sometimes that's the problem a little bit nowadays. I'm making myself sound really old, but it's, you have to have that parent support. And if some parents, if they can't take their child, and some of it might be down to money, because petrol prices and everything like that, some is down to time, they might not be in it 100% as well. Their child is going to struggle to get to where they need to be, because without that support group, as in your parents around you, it's difficult, because you just can't do it on your own. So for me, it was like I relied a lot on my mum and dad, and they, wherever I needed to be for competition, they would take me. A lot of the training sometimes involved late nights. I was training in Grantham a lot of the time, because Boston didn't have an athletics track back then. So I was traveling to Grantham, which was about 30 minutes drive sometimes. So it just involved quite a lot of late nights after school, sometimes weekends. I was selected sometimes for high performance training, and that would be in Sheffield. So my mum and dad would take me there. Sometimes that's like once a month or something like that. So I relied heavily on them, and they just took me where I needed to go.
It is a huge commitment for the whole family, isn't it? You're either in or you're not. Because
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is the thing, it just take up a lot of your time, and it can change your life a lot, you know. Yeah. So it is a big commitment. And if you are wanting to get somewhere in sport and to be elite, you have to have that motivation, that determination, and that time. And it's having that time and also the support around you. And even with my school, when I was at school in Boston, it was a case of they had to support me and allow me a little bit of time maybe off school to do the traveling. And when I went to college and university, they allowed me a little bit of time, a little bit of extra time to get in my coursework or my projects and stuff. So it was having that support. And when you've got that support, it makes things a lot easier. When there's not that support, it can make things a lot more difficult. So sometimes now I understand when children are saying they're struggling with fitting in their studies as well. But I always find that, and this is something that my parents always said, is that studies are a priority. And so for me, it was a case of my studying, my school was the first priority and not my athletics. And that's what I had to, even though I enjoyed my athletics, I had to have, it was my good education that my parents made me aware of come first.
so it sounds at this stage you're getting a very healthy level and sensible level of encouragement at home,
Yeah,
which is the
yeah,
perfect balance, really. Keep your feet on the ground, but you also
yeah,
feet down the track as well when you need to be in Wales,
yeah.
Scotland, Ireland, wherever.
Having that healthy lifestyle, still going out with my friends. As I got older, I wasn't going out so much because the competitions would obviously take place on the weekend. Still going out with my friends, but I was just trying to be a little bit more strict. And I always remember I made a mistake once of thinking, oh yeah, I'll be okay. And I went out one night, and then the next day I was competing and I didn't run very well at all. So I learned from that, and I'll never forget that because it was a county championships and I wasn't county champion. And even now, at my age, I still remember because I went out thinking I'll be okay, and I wasn't. I was keeping that healthy lifestyle, that balance, but it was a case of I was just making sure as well that I was still enjoying time with friends, but as I got older, I was becoming a little bit more stricter and not having like very late nights.
What's the worst thing about sprinting on a hangover?
The worst thing is just that feeling of getting to the finish line. You just feel awful from start to finish because it's the warming up as well. It's the traveling to get to the competition where it's like, okay, don't feel that great. And then to be having to run, you're doing your warm up and then you're having to sprint. And you just know in the back of your head, well, I did anyway, that I just wasn't at 100% focus and 100% level of where I wanted to be. It's something that I always remember. And once I did it that once, I never did it again. I learned from it.
It's understandable when you've got a 10,000-meter race and someone's being sick at the end. When
Yes,
it's a
yeah.
60-meter, 100-meter sprint,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
little bit
yeah.
less easy
Yeah,
to excuse.
exactly. I never did it again. I should have been county champion for the I think it was the 100 meters and the 200. I won the 300, but I got beat in the 100 and 200 if I remember rightly. And I should have won. It should have been me. And it wasn't. And I was feeling not great, but I learned from that, You learn as you go on.
Mm. So you're obviously very naturally talented and genetically talented. What can a coach bring to sprinting that an individual with raw talent can't do alone?
I think, yeah. So a coach can bring to sprinting I would say, a lot of motivation and also a lot of determination. And it's having someone there, I feel, that can support you, and they need to know you, if that makes sense. when you're there on at a competition, they need to, sometimes they can tell if how you're feeling, and you don't really have to say anything. They can just sort of tell with your body language, and it's just about getting the best out of you. If you're feeling nervous, if you feel nerves isn't a bad thing, it's always good to have a bit of nerves because of adrenaline, but it's about controlling those nerves. So it's about a coach. I feel a good coach, they know what to say to you. It's not about other athletes, and it's not about, oh, you've got a really good athlete next to you that's going to be in lane 2 and you're in lane 3. It's not about that. You don't need to know that as an athlete. It's just about them being positive. And also, a good coach knows the skills and what they can teach you, and about their knowledge about how to make you faster, how to prepare you before a race. And and just providing that good encouragement. But it's about getting the balance right. So when it becomes, everything obviously does become serious, but it's about it not becoming too serious and losing that element of enjoyment. Because when you start not to enjoy it is when athletes, and I've seen it happen, is when you've got a good talented individual and all of a sudden they drop out of the sport. And I've seen it happen so many times as I've got older, and it's a shame. And it can be too much pressure. So it's about coaches not putting too much pressure on you, and it can come from parents as well, but not putting too much pressure on you as an individual, getting the best out of you.
Mm. So do you find the best coaches, and you're a coach in your own right now, do you find the best coaches are specialist in one domain? So they might be an expert nutritionalist, they might be biomechanics that their expertise in, it might be personal training. Or do you find the best coaches have a little bit of everything to their game?
Yeah, so I find the best coaches have a little bit of everything. I mean, sometimes, because I do coach now, and I'm not an expert. I've only been coaching for about 5 years now, and so sometimes there's still certain things that I'm still learning. But I would definitely say that it's about knowing bits of everything, knowing. So for me, as a sprints coach, I know about sprinting, but if I need to get advice, I'll ask advice from another coach in regards to more longer work, more longer running, aerobic running. But definitely knowing about nutrition helps, knowing about just being mentally prepared, that does help. And also making sure, just generally making sure that an athlete is okay, that there's no, sometimes there might be problems in that athlete's personal life. They might not want to say anything to the coach, but sometimes it's always good for a coach just to check in, because they can tell if they're a bit down on that day, just to check that they're okay, everything's okay at home, everything's okay in the schoolwork. It's just about sort of being there for that athlete, really.
So you say it's very much a physical and mental game. When it comes to the mental attitude of it, what did you mean by that, having the right mental attitude?
Being positive, but also about being mentally strong, and just making sure that when you do lose, because you won't win everything, even Usain Bolt didn't win everything, and it's about how to accept that, because that's what makes an athlete stronger. So it's about, okay, it's not the end of the world. As you become more elite, also you're going to get injuries. That's the thing, and it's about how you cope with that. Some athletes, and again, as being a coach, I've seen it. I even saw it recently. They can have reoccurring injuries, and it's about, especially if they're very young, it's they just need to make sure that they know it's not going to ruin everything. They've just got to give it time. It's about learning. It's about making sure that they have that right rehabilitation, that right recovery. It's about being mentally prepared for that, because it's very rare that you go through any sporting career without an injury, and it is going to happen at some point. You might be very lucky and not, but it's just about how you deal with that. And some people are more better than others at coping with it. Some might just drop out of the sport if they think it's too much, and some might just go along with it and go along with the rehab, because sometimes it can take months to recover. It's about being mentally strong in different aspects and being prepared for races. So just making sure that you're ready on the start line. I've seen it before where athletes, they put themselves in positions before they even race. So sometimes they'll be looking at other athletes' performances, and they'll be like, okay, I should be able to come third. Like, what's the point in that? No, otherwise you might as well not run. So I always teach my athletes not to. I did have an athlete that did do that, and I always teach my athletes not to do that though, because it really is not the best thing to do at all. Otherwise, you might as well not compete, really. So yeah.
So run your own race. You're
Yeah,
only competing against yourself in the long
yeah,
run.
you are exactly. Yeah, because they look a lot into the weather, and that's the only thing. Obviously in the UK, the weather can change rapidly sometimes each day, where some athletes go abroad to get qualifying times because it's better weather, it's warmer. Sometimes we struggle a lot with the wind here, so sometimes if we're trying to get qualifying times for championships and we're into a headwind, it's not the best. It's not the best thing. But at the same time, when you think about it too much, you can end up really having a negative performance. So it's about not thinking about those sort of things on the day, and just running your own race, and just not getting psyched out as well by other athletes on the start line or in the warm-up area. There's certain things that athletes do. So in the warm-up area, before you get onto the actual athletics track, some athletes can try and psych other athletes out by just being quite loud and strutting their stuff like they own the place, and it's just about taking no notice of it, really. So yeah, it's
That's
just about
interesting.
being mentally strong and not being phased out. I've seen it so many times, and it's like, okay, that's where a lot of the mental games start. It's not actually, because when it's on TV, you only see the race a lot of the time. They have started actually showing some things in the warm-up area, I've noticed, but a lot of their mental games start in the warm-up area, and when you don't have it mentally, sometimes you lose your race before you even get on the track. So yeah.
Interesting. There is a great clip on YouTube of you racing in 2010 in the Birmingham Aviva. You're racing against the likes of Jetta and Jones, and watching that clip, it told me a few things. As the camera pans across the races, firstly, there's different body shapes in there. It's not one body shape to win a race. There are certain things that help, I'm sure, but different body shapes go into it. And as it goes along, they're reading out the competitors' names, and almost every single person along that line, bar yourself, at least breaks a smile, waves to the crowd, does something that is externally influenced. It's not part of their thing. They're waiting, and then obviously their game's not entirely on it. And then it pans across to yourself, and you are deadpan. You don't flinch when you hear your name. You are zoned in. How did you come to use that tactic at the start of your races?
It's always how I've been when I've been preparing for my races, and I've always just been so zoned in. And sometimes if there's like a big, like at places like Birmingham, or when I used to race at Crystal Palace or Sheffield, there's like big crowds sometimes. I always learned just to focus so much just on the finish line, and it would be going through my head about how to run the race. It's like, okay, make sure that I stay low, make sure that I accelerate and then hit that top speed, and then don't tense up. And so sometimes at the start of the race, I don't even hear the crowd, or I don't hear me being introduced. And, if they say, oh, Bernice Wilson, and I've done whatever time, sometimes I don't even hear it properly or at all. And when I start the race as well, and when I'm actually running, I don't hear anything. And I know it sounds very strange, but you're that zoned in. But everybody's different, everybody's different. And that's what would work for me. But you do get, obviously, people like, I keep using Usain Bolt as an example, but Usain Bolt, who was always very, very sort
Loose?
of, sorry.
Loose? He's very
Yeah,
loose.
very loose. Yeah, very loose on the start line. He was always very entertaining. He was so good to watch, so unique. He was so unique. And that worked for him. Now, for me, that probably won't work for me. But I never tried it. Maybe I should have done. But yeah, maybe it wouldn't work for me. But then you get other people afterwards, especially when he retired, trying to copy him. And it was just like not working for them, you know. And it's like everybody has their own, they just have their own way of preparing for a race. And it's what, yeah, and it's what works for them, really.
Mm. Did you have any superstitions before a race?
I used to, I used to when I was younger. I always used to have to, and it's going to sound really crazy, but I always used to have to make sure that I painted my nails before a race. It was very bizarre, and I stopped doing that. That was when I was in my teens, really, and I always used to make sure they were painted. It doesn't matter what color, just that they were painted. But I did read later on that in regards to female athletes, it was always a lot to do with their image was a big thing for them. If they didn't feel that they looked good or things like that, sometimes they wouldn't perform very well. So I don't know if that was something to do with it. A lot of the time on the start line as well, I used to do like 1 or 2 jumps, as in like 2-legged jumps. I'd always have to do that before I started the race. And I think that was just as like a preparedness. So before the startsman would say on your marks, I'd have to do like 2 jump ups. Okay, I'm ready now. That sort of thing. So it's little things that I used to do that I kind of, as I went on, I slowly stopped doing, really, to be honest. Because I didn't want it to influence me too much, because like, what if I didn't have time to? Because what was happening was, as I was getting older, I was going with teams more. I was going on buses, or I was going with the GB team. And so sometimes I wouldn't have time to paint my nails, or, you know, and I didn't want that to sort of influence things. So it can be negative in a way. So I kind of stopped doing it. Also, at the start of a race, when you're seeing it on TV, sometimes you'll see the startsman saying, "Okay, everybody get in a line," and this is before you get on your blocks. And I would always have to stand that little bit. And when I say little bit, literally maybe not even a foot, but half a foot in front of everybody else, just so that it seemed that I was already ahead. We weren't doing anything. It was just he wanted everybody in the line, and I would always be that little bit more in front of everybody else, so they were slightly behind me. And I always used to do that. It was just like a mental, I don't know, I felt like it mentally gave me the edge.
So that you were doing that for yourself, but was
Yeah,
that you a little bit to the other competitors as well,
yeah,
going, "I'm
uh,
first in this race, ladies.
yeah.
You're behind me at this point."
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And
Did,
I think at one point, I did get called up on it once, because the startsman noticed that I was a little bit ahead. And he says, "Bernice Wilson, get back a bit." I was like, okay. But it was kind of, a lot of the time they say, right, everybody in the line, and I would be that just a little bit more ahead of them. And it was for myself, and also they're already seeing that I'm ahead. And it's little mind games like that. So they don't talk about it a lot on TV and stuff, but there's so many different mind games. And that's when they say, "Okay, on your marks," and you know. So I used to do that sometimes.
I'm sure we got taught this at primary school, that the amount of time that racers take to get set in their blocks, some of them would naturally put their necklaces around. They would do all sorts of things just to
Yeah.
prolong it. So the person who's actually set first has to wait there for longer, and their muscles will naturally get a little bit colder, and they'll be a little bit not in time with everything else.
Yeah, there is that as well. So I must admit, as I was competing, I think the starters, they'll pick up on it quite a lot. So so what they would do, they would tell you to stand up. But yeah, a lot of the time they used to do that. And because I've done it before, it's like, okay, take a little bit longer, just sort my hair out and do everything like that. And then you get in your marks. And so some people are waiting there on the start line, and the muscles, yeah, are getting a little bit more tense and a little bit more weaker, and you're still preparing. But then if it becomes very obvious and the startsman says, "Right, everybody stand up," and it's like, okay. And then you get a bit of a warning. And I was like, "Bernice, in lane 2, can you be ready on time?" I don't think that happened to me, but it had happened to others. So they try and stop that now, but you can still see it happens a little bit. It does happen a little bit. Everyone takes a little while just to prepare themselves and, yeah, sort their lycra out and stuff, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh my God, you know,
And that
and yeah.
and that will naturally psych out someone who is newer to the sport, someone who's not been doing it as long and who's just doing the right thing, doing what the marksman's telling them, they'll be set for so much longer than the slightly more pro person who knows, no, I'm going to take my time here. Everyone's going to take their time. This is how it actually works. And so it's not
Yeah,
have a knock-on
yeah,
effect.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is it. Like some athletes, they might not be prepared for that sort of thing. And as you go on in time, as you start doing it for years, you sort of learn more. But that's where the coaches come into it. And it's like,
Mm.
okay, yeah, you can take a little bit of time, but not loads, just to prepare yourself. And also things like if there was a false start, some people you'd see, because especially with the men, they would do a start and they're already halfway down the track anyway. It's just how they accelerate, and then they get called back to the start. But some new athletes, they come back very quickly and they're still out of breath, but you'll see the more experienced athletes taking that little bit more time to get their breath, just to sort of get themselves set up again. But again, the officials, they're aware of that and they tell them, hurry up please to the start line, but they kind of ignore them sometimes because they know that they've used that little bit of energy in the way, and they want to be fresh for when they've got to go again. Because I've done it when I was quite new to athletics. It was like, okay, I need to get back to the start line really quick, and then as I got back to the start line, I was kind of out of breath, and I needed a few more seconds and stuff. But as you start doing more races, you sort of just become more experienced in certain things, just in everything. There's a lot of athletes at the minute, as they finish races as well, that will look at the electronic timing, which is normally on the left hand side of on the inside of the track. And it's a bit of a bugbear for me. They just need to run through the line, but you can see them as they're about to finish the race looking to see what time they've got, and that can slow you up a little bit. But yeah. So you sort of learn things as you go on, really. You sort of learn little things to do and not to do, really.
So your sprinting career is going from strength to strength. You've made it through university. You've been racing all the way through university. Fast forward to you're around the age of 23 and you meet a new coach, George Skifidis. Talk me through how that engagement went.
Yeah, well, George, so as I'd left university and I went back to Boston, and I was training at the time, a lot of the time, well, some of the time on my own. Sometimes my dad would be with me, and George happened to be at the track on his own, just running round. And that's when I didn't know who he was at all. And that's when I met him, and I think he could just see that I looked quite, I had good talent as I was training. The Boston Athletics track wasn't highly used, so I think I was the only athlete on the track actually at the time. That's when he approached me on the athletics track. He says, oh, I can see that you've got good talent, and about meeting and about coaching me. So that's how, because at the time I didn't actually have an actual coach, because I was I was in I'd left university. I didn't quite know what I was going to do work wise. I was still a little bit sort of in the middle of different things, and I didn't have like an actual coach. And that's how it all started. And he says he would be very interested in coaching me. And it went from there, really. That's how we met.
And you said very quickly it turned into not just a coach athlete relationship, you actually got together.
Yeah. So we actually we became closer as individuals, and I found that he was getting in touch with me quite often. So we would be in touch anyway about training and different things like that. But then there started to be the odd text message when I wasn't expecting it, because I was thinking, oh, it's in the evening, like, why are you texting me and stuff like that. We got closer, and then we started forming an actual relationship, as he was still my coach.
So at the start of this relationship, he's a coach. Which aspects of coaching did he excel in and was most exciting and brought your game to the next level?
So I would say he was very, very knowledgeable in the technical aspects, so the physical aspects of coaching. He knew about sort of what position my body should be in the acceleration phase, and what worked best for me. He was very good at knowing the technique side of it. And he was very, even the smallest thing I found made a big difference that some people didn't touch upon, previous coaches didn't notice before, about, okay, how your position should be when you're on the start line, when you're on your marks, different things like that. So he was very good at looking at things like that and noticing different things, and if things weren't quite right or how to make them better. He could read me very well as well, and I think that he sort of knew if I was okay before a competition. I feel he was very good at making sure that he was like mentally prepared. But in terms of, I would say, more the physical side, in terms of making sure that, okay, you're ready, you knew how to make you ready for a race in terms of your training. And I didn't have someone that was so focused on strength and conditioning training. So in terms of weight training, in a way, I didn't really have someone focused on that so much as what he was. So he knew all these different weight training exercises to do that I wasn't, even when we started training together at 23, that I wasn't really aware of, because I hadn't had that before. So we had really good knowledge in that, and that really helped me build up my strength. So yeah, and it was also in regards to plyometrics, so in about explosive work. I had done some of that work before, but again, he had this sort of knowledge that I wasn't aware of. He had different exercises and different things that he introduced me to. But I think because he's Greek, I think you often find that different countries have different styles of training. And so that was a benefit. I learned some things that I may have not learned before, I may have not even learned. So I started to become aware of just different techniques to use that really got me ready for my competing.
And what was George's background? He goes by the name Dr. George Skafidis, but he wasn't a medical doctor, was he?
No, so he wasn't actually a medical doctor. I can't remember what his doctorate was in now, but I knew he had a PhD in something. But he wasn't a medical doctor. But I, sometimes I think he introduced himself, yeah, as Dr. George Skafidas. I think he liked to think he was a medical doctor, but he really wasn't. I think he knew quite a lot in regards to science and in regards to medication, that sort of thing. But I'm not quite sure what his doctorate was in, to be fair.
And how do you think he came across all of this expertise in the plyometrics, in the weight training aspects of it? Was he a professional athlete in his own regard, or had he just been training for that long that he'd picked these things up along the way?
I think he used to do athletics. I think he did more long distance in regards to like 800 meters. I think he used to do, but I think he picked it up a lot from, I think, from coaches around him. I think it was from coaches around him. So he spent a lot of time in Bulgaria as well. I think he picked a lot of it up from different coaches, and he learned a lot from different coaches and I think even different athletes as well. And I think he liked to experiment quite a bit just to see, okay, will that work? So I think a lot of it was just his own knowledge, but I do think he picked a lot up from different coaches, and he had athletes previously that had competed at a high level. So I think when he was going to different competitions, international competitions, he would pick up quite a bit from different coaches there, because when you go to all these competitions you start to meet different coaches, different athletes.
How long had George been coaching you before he suggested that you include performance enhancing drugs in your regimen?
I think it was something like maybe 6 to 8 months. He said, okay, it's probably best. Well, he didn't say it's best that you start taking them. He kind of planted the seed a bit. We had a sit down conversation after about a good maybe 6 to 8 months from when he started coaching me. He says, this is what everybody does, and this is what you should be doing. You will not get anywhere unless you do. And it's a case of no, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. It's not something I want to do. So that's where the conversation kind of ended. But he then started saying more about it, and he's like, you're just wasting your time, basically. If you don't take performance enhancing drugs, you're just wasting your time, because everybody does it, and that's what you do as an elite athlete. And then I think as time went on, I started, I don't know, so part of me, I think this is the best way I can describe it, really. I kind of felt like I was becoming brainwashed and started to just go with everything he was saying. And that's when things started to go wrong.
So at this level, when did you decide to change your mind and to start listening to his advice and taking the performance enhancing drugs?
I think about a year after me and George met. So I might have been around 24, I'm not too sure. And that's when it was like, okay, maybe I need to, I think me and George became closer. Yeah, we become closer in the relationship. And I felt like I was trusting him more. And I started become just more I started to see him as everything. It was just become very strange. And that's when I thought, okay, what he's saying is right. And that's when I started to take performance enhancing drugs. And says he always used to say, oh, it's only he described it as a baby amount. He'd say, oh, it's only a small baby amount, it's nothing.
So he was supplying them and telling you what quantities to take and when.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, everything that he said and everything that he told me to do, I went along with. I'm not quite sure. I think he got this is something that I'm not sure of. I never was really quite sure where he got them from, but I do think that it come from abroad, I think.
And what form were the drugs in?
Yeah, so very small white tablets.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that could have been anything.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It could have been anything, literally anything at all. And that's where it become like I thought, okay, I trusted him, and that was that. Now, I do think he might have got them from Greece, but I'm not 100% sure. He would often go back to Greece or he'll go to Bulgaria. So that's where I do think he got them from. But it was something that we didn't really talk about. I kind of felt that it wasn't my place to, because I just started seeing him as like, okay, he's the boss and that's it, you know. Yeah, it's something that he just took control of. He knew, because it was very it was all about timing as well. He knew what amount to give, when to give it, when not to take it, and everything like that. And that's when things started to change, and I started to notice after a while my body changed. And yeah, but the relationship then started to change. Everything started to change as well, and not for the better, to be fair. And that's when things started to go even more downhill.
So this is 2009. He's telling you everyone that you're competing against, or at least the majority of the people that are doing well that you're competing against, are on similar or the exact same drugs, and you need to take them. Looking back, do you think that actually was the case?
I do think that a lot of people even now are on performance enhancing drugs. And I do think even back then a lot of people were on performance enhancing drugs. It wasn't a case of no, you need to take them. It was a case of not taking them. But I feel that certain people and the way in which things are done, people was able to go under the radar and get away with certain things. And it's a world that I became. So I went from somebody that was like a teenager enjoying running and without a care in the world, to someone that got introduced to like a dark world all of a sudden. And you started to notice things. And it was a case of like, I started to notice that athletes were not, so athletes that were capable of going through a heat, a semi-final and a final would sometimes drop out of the final. And there was reasons for that. And I think the reasons were that basically, if you don't get into the final, you wouldn't get tested. You wouldn't get tested for performance enhancing drugs. So you started becoming aware of different things, because I'd be thinking, oh, why are they not in the final? They qualified, they won the race, or and then you'd hear that they got injuries, or you would hear, and I'm not saying it might have been genuine, but I don't think all the time was genuine. So sometimes it was a case of you started to become alert to certain things, and you started to notice things were being done differently. And even coaches were saying, pull out of the final to certain athletes. And yeah, so it kind of, you see another side to it, that as a youngster and as someone that went into sport just on sports day, just winning the flat race. You started becoming introduced to a different world. I do think that there are, I can't say 100%, but I do think that there are stuff like that would still go on. I'm not competing at the minute. I might do at some point again, 'cause I do keep getting asked to. But I do think that things like that in the higher competitions does still take place, because coaches tend to be one step ahead of the testers. I don't know how they do it, but they just seem to be one step ahead and just know how to dodge certain things to basically excel without getting caught. And it's a shame that it's like that, because it's not fair for other athletes. But I do think things like that possibly still goes on.
So all of a sudden, you can see behind the matrix, and you're seeing all these little events that are just playing into the narrative that George is feeding you, that you're not the only one, even if you were on it or you weren't. Other people are potentially taking things, giving them an unfair advantage on yourself. And it's all playing into that narrative, and things are starting to add up and make sense now a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, that's it, exactly. And so I start to see things, and then I start to see that, oh, okay, this is what I need to do. This is the world. And it become a bit of a darker world. And it was like, oh, is this what it's actually like? Okay, well, this is what I need to do then. It's such a shame that it gets like that, because you just this is where the enjoyment goes, and this is where like sport does become serious, because I know you can start to win prize money, and you become a role model, and you become in papers and things like that. But you see this other side of the sport to it, and it's not a good side. It's really not a good side. And and it's kind of like a dark world, and the enjoyment goes. A lot of the time the enjoyment goes, and things become so serious, things become so much more pressurized, and you kind of all of a sudden you're in it and you get swept along. And especially when, for me, I had a coach that was very forceful on certain things, and it was either his way or no way, and he wasn't taking no for an answer. And and he was just he become very strict. Sometimes it was a case of shouting at me in front of people, and people would then message me and ask if I was okay. And so I became like, okay, George, I'll do whatever you say, George, and everything like that. So I was just becoming just doing whatever he said, really.
Was there ever any open conversations between athletes about drug use? Or is that part of the dark world that it was never openly talked
Yeah,
about?
there wasn't any conversations about it, but you sort of just suspected what was happening. It was quite difficult, but it's you just sort of suspected, but it was never spoken about openly. I was never in any of those conversations, but it really shouldn't get to that point, but unfortunately it really does. And this is where the coaches this is where they need to step in, because they allow it to happen. Some coaches allow it to happen, and they're the reason it doesn't happen, unfortunately, because it's the athletes that face the ban. And sometimes you will get the coaches as well, but so in the press, you never really, well, not all the time, it's the athlete that takes a lot of like, okay, such and such has been banned, but you don't hear about the coach a lot. And it's a lot of it is down to them. The athletes like me are just like someone that is just enjoys their sport, and then, but it's like they don't go out looking for it. Not all that, I will say, there might be in some cases, but it's not, sometimes it's not the athlete, it's the coaches, because the coaches, I don't know, the coaches just become that sort of like, okay, we need to win. It's like they're competing in a way. And so it's sometimes the coaches that are the main reason, but they might go under the radar in regards to anything happening to them, or in regards to them not being put in the limelight about anything. So, and they just go on to coach another athlete. And then it will happen to another athlete. It's a shame that's how it works, really.
So 2009, you're competing at your level. At the time, London 2012 is in your sights. And I think the quote was that you're on course to make an impact at London 2012, one way or another. How was George selling it to you that you'd be able to get away with this?
I was on course to like just even compete at London 2012. Even if I was in the relay, it would have been like a dream for me. In regards to just being prepared, George was basically saying, I just need to be prepared. It's a lot to do with training. And he was just making sure that I was still taking everything that I needed. He was making sure that he was giving me these steroids, but it wasn't, I must admit, it wasn't something that was happening, every day, all the time. But he was making sure that I was taking whatever I needed to take, because I must admit, I probably didn't know everything that I was taking because I was just trusting him at the right time. And he was also just kept saying, if you don't, you're not gonna get anywhere, because this is what everybody is taking, and this is how you get somewhere. And so I think for me, it was a case of, I really want to get to 2012. And I could see that everybody, well, this dark world, I could see what was happening. And it was like, okay, I'll just go with whatever he said, because I trusted him. I believed him. I did train a lot. I trained very hard. But then what I found was that what I was taking was making me train hard. So sometimes I would be training for about 4 or 5 hours a day. And when I say training, it was and this is for me, I was thinking, okay, London 2012 is coming up, I really want to get prepared for it. But this is, I could just keep going and going and going, and it was intense training. As if I was doing squats, I was doing cleans, I was doing snatches, I was doing deadlifts, and I was squatting about sometimes 120k, even more, I think, at times. And I just kept going, and it was a lot. So I knew, I just kept feeling stronger and stronger, and I kept going and going and trying to prepare myself.
So you could, on these substances, you could push your body past the limits that you previously could. What were the other positive benefits of taking these substances?
I could push my body more than what I ever could before. I definitely noticed that. I would say the other benefits was that I just was able to recover quite quick. I was able to, I felt like there was just no stopping me in a way. It was very strange. I think it definitely changed me mentally, because I felt so yeah, it does things to you physically. You become stronger, you become tougher. And then I just become mentally tough, because I thought, well, if I can just keep lifting weights and keep running, and my sessions are going on for 4 or 5 hours, it just mentally, I would go into a race and just think, well, I'm going to win. And not all the time, but a lot of the time I did. I think it just becomes very dangerous, because you recover very quick, but actually your body is taking a very hard knock. It's just not natural. I shouldn't have been lifting heavy weights and doing sessions for like 4 or 5 hours on a weekend. And sometimes I'd go back, say that was on a Saturday, and I'd go back on a Sunday and do another 2 or 3 hours. And it just really wasn't natural. And like I said, it wasn't just like a jog around the track, it was like quite intense training. So at the Boston track that I trained, they had the athletics track, and then they had the weights room indoors. So I was sometimes splitting my sessions between doing weights and sprint training. And I just kept going and going and going.
So those are the positive effects of what you were taking. And as far as George is concerned, these were baby doses still, which were you suspecting that they probably weren't baby doses? They were actually full adult doses?
Yeah, this is something that I didn't know. And because they were very small tablets, it looked like they were baby doses, but I know it doesn't work like that. There was probably not whatever milligrams, I don't quite know, but they probably weren't baby doses, but he kept saying, oh, the baby doses. And I'm not sure if they were or they weren't, but I do know that after some time, my body started to change, and I didn't really like it. And it was like, I then became I knew that I became bigger, I became more muscular. And as a female, I even when I was younger, I was always someone, I didn't do a lot of weight training when I was younger, hardly anything, but I was always somebody that when I did train, I could see that I become quite toned, a little bit muscular quite quickly. I think it was just my body. And so with these, I definitely could tell that it made me a lot more muscular. And it wasn't very, I know females do become like that, and but the way in which to the extent it was quite a lot, it wasn't very feminine in a way, and I become a lot more spottier. I wasn't somebody that had loads of spots anyway, and people started to notice, and that's the thing. I become quite conscious after some time because my mum would notice that I'd become spottier, and my friends also said they didn't know, but they was like, oh, Bernice seems a bit different. But they weren't quite sure. So I knew that my physical appearance was starting to change. Yeah, and I didn't like it. I must admit, I didn't like it. It wasn't, when I would look in the mirror, I didn't really like the physical sides of who I'd become.
Did you raise these concerns with George?
Yeah, I did, and he said he didn't really take a lot of notice, and he says it's nothing to worry about. He didn't really say a lot about it, so he wasn't he yeah, he wasn't too bothered. He was more just concerned, like, you need to take this at this time, and that's it. But when I wouldn't really say a lot really in regards to it, because I knew that he wasn't phased by it, so he wasn't overly concerned about how I felt about the way I look and things like that. He was just more about, okay, let's do this training session and let's make sure that we hit such and such target, because he would keep pushing me to reach my limits in training, and so that's what he was more concerned about.
So unfortunately now I want to flag that this relationship did turn into a controlling and abusive relationship. The reason that I raised it at this stage was I've recently listened to a TED talk by Leslie Morgan Steiner, and it was fascinating. And the name of the TED talk was "Why Do Domestic Violence Victims Stay? Why Don't They Leave?" And she breaks it down into the early 3 stages. First of all, the person charms and seduces the victim. We'll use the word victim here for want of a better word. First of all, they charm and seduce them, potentially with their knowledge of a sport that the person is in. The second stage is they isolate the victim and they break their means of communication and they isolate them from friends and family. And then the third stage is they introduce the threat of violence, not the actual violence, but they introduce a threat of it. How much do those 3 stages resonate with you and what you went through?
Yeah, I would definitely say those 3 stages, yeah, are right. I mean, for me, it was a case of, so me and George moved in together. So that was one of the first stages, really. And he become very controlling over me. So I always remember, because once I was there in the flat, it was like, that was that. No one really knew what was happening then. And I always remember that he become even more controlling. And it was a case of, I always remember seeing a friend nearby as we walked from, I think me and George was walking from a pub, and my friend waved across the road, a male friend who I'd grown up with literally from primary school. And I happened to see him and I waved at him. And then when we got home, he did not like that at all, that I waved to him, and it was literally, hi, how are you, and good to see you, and that was that. And that was like one of the first alerts, and I was thinking, what, why you got an issue with that? I only said hello. He didn't do anything, but I knew that he wasn't very happy about it. Certain things, when I used to go onto the computer and I was on Facebook, he didn't like the fact that who I was talking to anybody that he didn't know. So I then become a lot more isolated. So I was only mixing with certain people. I was literally going to work and then not having a lot of a social life because he didn't like it. And then that was it. And I was just literally working, training, going to bed, and that was it. So I then started not to see my friends so much as well. And I didn't realize it so much at the time, really, that it was happening because I didn't really see it happening, which sounds very strange. I just sort of, again, I just went along with it. And I then started to not go to different events that my friends were going to. If it was if they was all going out at a certain time, I would be saying, oh no, I won't be there, and or I'd be saying I'd be there and then pull out last minute, and it was just awful. So I then become very isolated and started then to become feel a little bit more lonely. I wasn't totally alone, but I felt a little bit more lonely. So what happened was I was trying to get out of that situation. I thought, oh, what is happening? You know, what is happening? I said, you know, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. I just don't want it. And I always remember that we met quite late on at night. It was something like 7 o'clock at night. I was in my car, he was in his. I got into his car and I said, look, I just don't want to be in this relationship. It's not working. It's not working for me. It's not something that I want to be in. And then he hit me. I think it was more of a, he said as well, more of a slap, and my nose just bled. And that I was in his car. And then I ran out and I got into my car, and then I went to home, which was my mum's home. And it was about a 5-minute drive because we were just down the road. And I went, and I think actually I'd stopped living with George anyway at the time, and I was living with my mum, I think because I was becoming not happy with certain things. So I went back to what was my home at the time, and it was very dark. And I always remember that he was literally, it's like he was chasing me down the road. I was in my car, he was in his, and I really thought he was going to kill me. I always remember I was so scared. And given the fact that the drive was about 5 minutes, which doesn't sound that long, but it was at the time. I pulled up home. Like I said, it was about 7, 8 o'clock at night. It was dark. And then my mum opened the door because I ran inside, and then my mum could see like the blood down my face and down my clothes, and she said, what is happening, what has happened? And I told her, and George was outside in the parking area. She shouted at him, my mum didn't like him anyway, she shouted at him to leave me alone. And then I went inside and I was crying, and yeah, so that was that. And my mum took me to hospital, I think the next day, because we weren't sure if he had broken my nose. And so we went to the hospital. They say they do x-ray for broken noses or something. So I never actually did know if it was broken. I don't think it was, but it was, yeah, I even remember the hospital staff saying, who did this to you? And I says, oh, um, a, a, an ex-boyfriend. And I always remember the nurse saying, make sure he is an ex. He's like, as in like he stays an ex. And I was like, yeah. And so I just left hospital, and that was it really. And yeah.
Was that the first time that it moved from being psychologically controlling to actually physical violence?
Yeah, it is. It's the first time it moved from, from being to physical violence. Then what happened was I then went back to him, which was the biggest mistake ever. And I don't know why I did that. I think part of it really was because so I was at my mum's, and sometimes he would be outside in his car, outside the window, but in his car because my mum lived in a bungalow, so I could see him. And he was saying, oh, I'm really sorry, and we need, because I stopped training and everything, and we need to get back to training, and we need to do this, come back and everything like this. What are you doing? You're wasting your time and everything. He just wasn't having it. I wasn't interested. And then all of a sudden I thought, oh, okay, he's apologized, maybe everything's fine. And that's when I went back to him, and I moved in with him, and yeah, and I started training again. And I think there's a part of me that was like, oh, if I don't go back, maybe my athletics will just, everything will stop, and I won't do very well and everything like that. So I think I had a bit of an element of that as well, because I was so passionate about my athletics. Even though that had happened, I went back to him. It was then when things did get worse, that's when I should have not, and I went back. And sometimes it's even now, when I hear things about domestic violence and everything, it's sometimes you don't realize, and it's so hard at, to see, but I understand what some women talk about, and men actually.
Mm.
But sometimes you don't see it. You don't see that it's happening to you, even though that you're in it, and other people can see it's happening. And when I say about what happened to me, I think, oh my god, why did I go back? I don't know why I went back. And but sometimes you just don't see it, and you just kind of go along with it, and you think, okay, that person knows best. And you just have to make that big change and get out of it. But it's getting out of it, because they're so convincing that you're in the wrong. So at the time, I suffer with, I have a weak blood vessel in my nose. So my nose can sometimes bleed quite easily. It used to, it doesn't so much now. But and so I was thinking, oh, maybe I was starting to get this thing in my head. I started to think, oh, maybe, okay, he just slapped me, and actually it just made me bleed loads anyway, because I have this issue with my nose. I started to sort of blame myself, and it was like, what on earth am I doing? So yeah, and it was just crazy, because he hit me with a force. I always remember he hit me around the face with a force. And it was more of a slap and not a punch, but it was still a heavy force. It was a massive mistake that he did. And I just went back, and I thought, okay, maybe it was, maybe he's right. And yeah, I need to get back to training, and it's okay. I'm going to be fine. And I went back to him, and it was one of the biggest mistakes that I made.
And it all plays into that idea that someone is creating a world that they control, and you're within that world, and there is no way out of that world. Like you say, it's going to affect my athletics if I'm not with this person. He's still your coach. He can still be your coach and not your partner. But in your head, it's affecting my whole world, and I need to be there. Something that Steiner said in the TED Talk, which I would encourage anyone to go and look at, was that the person that it's happening to wouldn't call themselves a victim, and they don't think that there is anything wrong necessarily. Maybe they just think there's something troubled with the person, and they can bring them round, and they talk themselves into believing that there is nothing wrong and it's fine, and he just snapped, and it's a little bit of my fault, it's a little bit of his fault, we can work through it, but I can change him or her. Like you say, it works both ways. But it's interesting that world is created. When we go back to the way Steiner says, first it's charm and seduce, and you put the person, the person who turns into the victim, you put them on a bit of a pedestal, and you say they're so great and they're so in love with you, etc., etc., and you charm and seduce them. You get them to that stage, and then it goes into the isolation stage, and then the threat of violence. Thinking of those three stages, looking back on it, which is very easy to do now with the power of hindsight, what were the red flags that should have been obvious, which are not obvious when you're in the moment, that you and other people could look out for?
So before we even got into a relationship, with the late night text messages and things like that, I think that is something that is like, it should have been stopped straight away, so it all didn't happen. But I think once we was in the relationship, and I was with him, I was living with him and everything like that, it was basically when he was, I think the red flags was when I was just wanting to see my friends. And the main thing was when I was just waving to a male person, and there was hardly any conversation at all. So that's what I think was a red flag for me, that I should have then thought, what is the issue? And he proper, if I remember correctly, he proper shouted at me when we got home. So I think it was having just those conversations with people that wasn't him, basically, if I was speaking to anybody else other than him. And it was also, it then become the way he would speak to me as well. So it was like not giving me the choice on certain things, and it was like, about, okay, you have to do something like this or do that. Or if so at my job, if I was having sometimes, because at the time I was a sports development officer, and sometimes there would be meetings in the evenings around 6 to 7 o'clock, because I'd be meeting with sports clubs, and he would, even though it was my job, he would proper flipped. I always remember one time he really flipped out because I had a meeting and I wasn't able to train as well. And so I think it's about that communication side when you start to see that something like it's like that short fuse all of a sudden. And I was thinking, oh, maybe he's just a bit tired or something. And also, he didn't have a lot of friends in the UK. He didn't have hardly any family in the UK. And sometimes I think, oh, maybe he's just, I don't know, missing his family or something like that. I was it. So I wanted to go obviously and spend time with friends. And so sometimes I wouldn't, 'cause I think, oh, he doesn't have many friends, and I'd stay with him at home. It was kind of like feeling sorry for him in a way. That's how it became, which, yeah, it was very unfortunate.
And obviously, it's trickier as he's cutting down the amount of communication that you have with friends and family. But were there any red flags with the friends and family? You said the mum didn't like him from the get go.
Mm.
Did anyone ever say anything to you? And no one can predict
Mm.
who's going to, it's going to lead into a abusive relationship. But did anyone ever say anything to you, or any other flags that you look back and you think, that one could have been one that in another world someone might have spotted?
I think my friends started. I think it was when we met. We did meet up for a drink at one point, and they noticed I just seemed different. I just seemed quite quieter, and I looked different. I think because my body was changing. So I think it's when friends start to notice, and it's not to ignore it. And because they're your friends for a reason. And so it's like sometimes they know you better than you know you, than you know
Mm.
yourself in a way. So it's like, well, I'm fine, I'm fine. So I kind of wish then that I listened to them more, because they weren't aware of what was going on, but they suspected something was wrong. They suspected something was wrong. So I wish back then because that was the chance for me to be open up more and be like, you know what, this is happening. And I didn't say anything. I just says, no, I'm fine. And that was that. Yeah, my mum didn't like George. And I knew that as well. So she suspected, but she didn't know that something was happening. Again, I wish then I'd opened up and listened to my mum, but I think my mum, she knew that. I think she knew at some point I would realize myself really. But yeah, but I think it I think as well when I was at work, so I worked as a sports development officer, and I did actually open up to somebody in my job. I didn't say a lot, but it was after the day after, I think, or a couple of days after George had hit me, I was meant to meet up with a colleague to go for a meeting, and I think I didn't. He suspected then that something was wrong because I was very quiet on the phone. I didn't say a lot about it, but I said, I'm just having some difficulties, and he wanted me to report it and everything like that, and I didn't. I know that one of my brothers as well wanted me to speak up about it more once he found out that he hit me and everything. And I didn't. When people started to notice things, and I think it was because I become more quiet, and it's then I think when you realize that you're changing, your personality's changing, but it's very hard to know yourself. But when other people are picking up on it, it's like, okay, maybe something is wrong. Maybe I really need to open up about it and see what they think about it. And I didn't, and that was the mistake that I made. I didn't open up about it, and I just kept going along with it.
So violence, we'll stay on this for a little bit longer, but then we
Mm.
will definitely move on. So obviously violence takes a lot of different forms. Before the actual slap, which we can definitely agree, there was some force behind it, and that was a proper hit. Before that, was there any threat of physical violence, or when he actually snapped and did that, were you shocked, or could you see it coming before?
There was no physical violence before the slap. When he did it, I was shocked, but then once after a while after it happened, as in the night, I wasn't so shocked, because in his the way he is as a person, and when he was coaching me, he is the strictest coach I've had. So I then started to think, I think that's him as a person. He's quite a strict person. He's somebody that has quite a short fuse. If I wasn't doing an exercise quite right, he wasn't very happy about it and would be shouting at me. And sometimes people would hear outside of the training area, whether it was a track or the weights room. So then I started to think about it, and at the time, yeah, it was a massive shock. But then afterwards, it was a case of thinking, actually, I think this might be him, but it might just be a one-off, But once more violence started to happen, because I went back to live with him, such as sometimes he would get me literally around my neck, and to the point where my neck was hurting for 2 or 3 days. And again, I thought I was going to die. And he was literally got both of his hands around my neck. I can't remember why. Obviously, it doesn't matter why I shouldn't have done it, but I can't remember what was happening in that instance. He wasn't happy with something. I don't know if we had a disagreement about something, but he couldn't have liked something I said. If it was, again, it might have been because I wanted to meet up with somebody, I don't know. And I always remember that, and I always remember my neck feeling so bruised and just awful. Now, the only thing is, because obviously I'm black, you couldn't see a lot of the harm. And I know this might sound, I don't know, I feel a bit funny about saying it really, but it is the case. A lot of the marks don't really show up so much. I could see the marks, but they weren't really that, because my neck was pretty bruised at one point, but you couldn't really see it a lot.
So friends, family, colleagues,
No,
they had no inkling.
no. Now
Yeah.
there was a time where, again, at the track, because like I said, he had a short fuse, and I think something happened, and I think he hit me round my mouth or something happened, and I ended up with like a thick lip. Now that you could see, and I hid it. I think I wasn't at work for a few days anyway, and I remember keeping my head down quite a lot to try and hide it, so that you could see quite a lot. But in terms of bruises and things like that, you couldn't really see it so much. But in terms of what was on my face at that point, you could see it because it had swelled up, and you could see something was wrong there. But I tried to hide it myself so people wouldn't see it. And then I went home. I think I stayed in for a day or two, whatever, and it went down. When it did become quite obvious, I tried to hide it myself.
And did you
So
do such a good job that nobody said anything?
yeah,
Really?
nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. The only time that was the most apparent, like the most obvious, was when my nose was just when my nose was bleeding, and my mum saw that. But so nobody really noticed anything. And if there was something that was more noticeable, I tried to hide it and just stayed in.
Well, thank you for being so open and honest with all this. I'm really sorry to hear that everything that has happened. But we fast forward now to June 2011. There's a sports meet in Bedford. You supply a urine sample after presumably doing quite well at the sports meet, and you
Yeah.
failed the drugs test. You then appeal, and you become the first British athlete to receive a 4-year ban for doping. Talk me through those events.
At the event in Bedford was when I produced a positive urine sample. Now, George was very, I always remember, so again, you're in the warm-up area and everything like that. I'd done my competition. I think I did the 100 meters. I can't remember, maybe the 200 meters as well. And then I go back to the warm-up area because you do your cool down and everything like that. And then I got approached to do a urine sample. And I always remember George seemed a little bit he started walking away and seemed a little bit uncomfortable, and I thought, okay, what is the issue?
So would you taper down your drug use? Not, he would supply you less of the pills as you came up to a track meet. So therefore, in theory, it was flushed out your system, so you should be fine. And
Yeah.
so do you think he knew he hadn't tapered it down in the sufficient way at that point.
Yes, exactly. So he was very like, and this then all made sense. So he was very much like, you use this at this time, at this part of the day, and you use that amount or whatever. For me, it was always remember a little white tablet. I didn't see it. I just saw it as just a tablet. But I think there might have been like different milligrams and things within these tablets that I wasn't aware of. Now, I think on that, well, what happened was he got it wrong. And so I don't know if he thought I wouldn't be tested. Maybe he thought I wouldn't do so well at the competition, because normally you don't get tested if you don't do that well. You just don't. I think they don't. So all their testing kits, I assume that there'll be a cost to their testing kits. So they're very selective on who they test. They don't really want to be, and I shouldn't say it as a waste, but because they might catch someone you don't know, but they don't really want to be testing somebody that doesn't do that well in a competition, because they're probably not someone that's going to be using performance enhancing drugs. It's not always the case though, but they're probably not. So they want to be testing the ones that are winning or in the top 3, or things like that. So I must have done. I did well in the Bedford competition. I'm not sure. Maybe George didn't realise I'd do so well, or maybe he just had got it wrong. He just had got it wrong. And now what happened was he started to become very, when I got approached, you get approached, they walk up to you and they says, you need to come to doping control. And doping control is either an area within the athletics arena that is just for doping and doping control. And so there'll be some toilets, there'll be a little meeting room where it's literally sectioned off just for the athletes and just for the doping control officers. So it is proper sectioned off. Nobody else goes there. So they don't allow tampering of samples and everything. They're very strict in that way. And so once they approach you, you cannot go anywhere else. So if I said, oh, well, I need to go to the toilet on the other side of the track, they won't allow you, because they need to see what you're doing. And everything from then it has to be with them. All of a sudden, I saw George kind of walking off, looking a little bit on edge. But I didn't think a lot of it at the time. And I went and did my urine sample. Now, I didn't really get tested a lot. I wasn't an athlete that got tested a lot. I wasn't a lottery funded athlete. I still worked. I wasn't on the whereabouts. So normally the lottery funded athletes, they're on what is called like the whereabouts scheme, the program, and they have to literally say where they're going to be at what time of the day, and they have to be very honest about that. There has been athletes that have got banned because they haven't been honest. And this is another thing, they haven't been honest about where they've been. So it's not necessarily the fact that they've provided a positive urine sample or anything like that. It's because they're trying to hide something. And so they receive a ban. Now, for me, I wasn't at that level, and I didn't get tested outside of competition a lot at all. I wasn't even tested inside of competition a lot at all, because I was running at a good level, but I wasn't the best really. And I wasn't, I was still working and I wasn't lottery funded. So I wasn't tested a lot. So I don't know if George thought I wouldn't be tested. I'm not too sure. I got tested and I produced a sample, and that was it. Nothing, that was it. And then I always remember that George, I think, was just driving one day, and he said something like, would you leave me if it come back positive, or something like that? And I said, no, why'd you say that? And he says, oh, I just wondered. It did come back positive. So they were trying to find me. So found me, and I was at work. I worked for East Lindsey District Council at the time as a sports development officer. And they come to my work. I think I'd pulled up in the car park, and that's when they handed me a letter basically to say that I'd been positive. So, and then from there, I met with the doping control officers that night, Boston, and George as well. And he didn't want me to say anything. And I was sat there at the meeting. I think there was me, George, a doping control officer that I'm now, I haven't spoken to him for a while, but we're good friends. And he's so impressed with how far I've come. And there was somebody else as well that was there, and we had a meeting, and he basically said that it'd come back positive. I literally near enough sat there in silence. George didn't want me to say a lot, and yeah, and we just he says, oh well, nothing's been taken and everything like that, and but obviously I knew I had, and he didn't want me to say anything. And that was that. So basically, after then, I remember going home, and I remember being very lonely. I remember feeling in like a very dark world. Like everything just seemed a lot darker. I was in a very dark moment, a dark space, and I just felt very much on my own. And I knew that my whole athletic career would just go downhill, was just gonna stop, and everything that I'd worked hard for was gonna come to an end. Well, at that point I didn't know, but I suspected it was going to. So from then nobody still knew anything, because everything wasn't in the press or anything like that. Nobody knew anything, and I kept a lot to myself. And then it became in the press. So then it became, yeah, everybody became aware of what had happened. And that's when things just turned really bad. And I just felt very on my own. I went onto social media, which was a mistake. And I went onto Facebook, and people were talking about me. They didn't know anything about what had properly happened, because I wasn't speaking, so I wasn't helping myself. But some people suspected, and there was like, this isn't Bernice. A lot of it must be down to George. And then things started to come out in national papers. I think I was in the Sun on the back page, or one of the back pages. So things just started to become a lot more serious, a lot more real, a lot more darker. I was sort of at a point in my life that I'd never been before, never wanted to be before. And I felt like I just lost and was losing everything. And then from there, I then went on to the hearing for it, and it was already out in the press anyway. So even if it become that I hadn't actually committed a doping offence, it was always, I think people have made their minds up in any case. We lost the hearing. I say we because George was involved, but at the hearing that I was at, it was like I was on my own, because you literally sit in front of people. George didn't say anything. He didn't want me to say anything. I was offered a welfare officer as support. He said no, not to say anything. And I literally took the full blame of it myself.
So did you fess up at that point, and did you say that you had done something? Because there was the reason that you got the full 4 years, which is the maximum for a first-time offender. It was called, I think it was aggravating circumstances, something like that. So was that part not speaking to them?
Yeah.
Part, it was a couple of substances, it wasn't just one.
Yeah. There was I can't remember the substance. There was, yeah. So there was clenbuterol.
Clenbuterol.
Yes.
I've done a bit of research.
Yes.
I can't
You
say the
know
word, but
what?
I know what it is.
No, that's it. Yeah. So there were two substances. So that's where the aggravated circumstances come from, but also at the fact that I didn't admit to anything, because George didn't want me to. So they're saying basically, well, you're not helping yourself, in a way, and you're not. So the thing is, and I didn't realize this until my second ban more, really. They suspected it was George. They knew, but they couldn't do a lot about it, because I wasn't speaking up. They just punished me, because it's like, well, you're not helping us. We want to get George. We know it's not a lot. You did take that substance, so you are to blame, because that's what they say. You ingest a substance, so it is you. Nobody forces it down your throat with their hand or whatever. Well, yeah. So it's like, you ingest it, you do get a ban. But the thing is, the ban would have been less, Could have been 2 years, could have even been less if I had spoken and I didn't speak. So sometimes, and I will just say it again, so you'll find that sports people will get a ban all of a sudden. That's 2 years, and then you'll see that it changes down to a year or months, or sometimes they're cleared, and that's because eventually they speak up. It's not all the time the case. Sometimes it might be that there was an issue with their because you have a B sample as well. Maybe the B sample comes back different to the A sample, so maybe that's the reason, and they then lessen the ban, or they just throw it out of the water because it doesn't match your A sample. So when you do a urine test, you actually do a urine test into one pot, and then you split the pots. You pour, sorry, I'm going into a bit of detail now, but you pour one part into an A cup and one part into a B cup. Now, if the samples are different, there's an issue there, and your ban just gets lifted, basically, a lot of the time. So, but because I wasn't speaking up about it, they hit me with the full 4-year ban. I think it was the longest ban in history for a British athlete. So that's why I got 4 years.
And going back to the positive drug test, once you test positive, and like you say, if A and B both test positive, is that it? It's cut and dried. There's no chance to claim that something has happened or something's been tampered with or tested subsequently and say, look, I've not taken anything, keep testing me. It's an error. Or are they pretty strict with it that it's, look, you've tested positive, there's a reason you've tested positive?
A lot of the time they are pretty strict. Now you can appeal, but they're normally quite strict. You have to have very good evidence. So you might hear things like people say it's in meat. That's a lot of what people come up with nowadays, to say, oh, well, it was in meat or whatever. But it's and some people actually do get away with that. It might be the case. Like I says, I don't know. But you have to have very good evidence. Some people will say that their water bottle was tampered with, but how do you prove that? It's a lot of different stories that people will say, but it's at the end of the day, this is why the doping control officer has to be with you all the time. They literally see you urinate. The door is not closed, and they see you put the sample inside those bottles, and they see you have to yourself, as the athlete, seal the bottles. And they're not just normal bottles, they're like bottles that you screw them and they click, but not click as in like a medicine bottle. They have it's a bit hard to explain, but they have like little slots around the lid. There's no way of getting that undone. It's not a case of pushing it down and getting it undone. I don't know if it's some sort of machine they use to undo it or whatever. But once they're locked, that's it, they're locked.
So as a clean athlete, you'd be happy with that because no one's tampering to it unless you've got some specialist machine to open it up again.
Yeah, I would. Exactly, yeah. It would be a case of, okay, I'm happy with that, The bottle has a number on it, you put that number on a form, you sign it, and then you even put on there if you're happy with the whole procedure that's happened. If you're not, for instance, if you feel that the doping control officer put something in it or whatever, or he turned his back when he had your sample and it wasn't closed, whatever, you put that on the form. You can put that, but they're very professional, the doping control officers, and they just watch what you do, and every detail. So you put down the medication that you're on. It's all about when you did that sample. Everything is very precise and everything is very exact. I did appeal it.
So why did you appeal it? Did you appeal it to come across as an innocent athlete if you didn't have any other evidence to put in there? What was the purpose of the appeal?
So I appealed it. I must admit that the reason why it was appealed was, again, a lot from George, because I thought, okay, maybe there might be something wrong with the B sample, and maybe it can be looked at again. But I know that George wanted to, he was very much like, okay, yeah, we need to appeal it and everything like that. So, and I did think, okay, I knew obviously that substances was in there, but there might be a chance of something there might be an issue with the B sample because you just hear of it and then it gets thrown out, you know. So it's like, okay, maybe something can happen. I don't know. Luck is on my side and something can happen. But at the end of the day, I knew that I'd still taken those substances. So that was that for me.
So
And
can the bang get any worse from appealing it?
no,
So
it
there's
can't.
no harm. There's actually no
Yeah,
harm in appealing it.
yeah,
You might as well, and like you say, hope you get lucky.
yeah.
Luck might be on your side, and then your ban is completely lifted.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that was the thing. It was like, might as well. And yeah, and obviously it didn't get nothing happened. But
So was it always 4 years from the very start, or is only
yeah,
it
it
was
wa-
always 4 years? And so at the age of 23, 24, their prime years, their 4 prime years that you could be competing, improving. I mean, nothing to stop you training in the
mm.
background while those 4 years are going through, but those are your prime years gone.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When they said 4 years, my heart just sunk because I thought, oh my God, I was thinking of London 2012 Olympics. I was thinking not just that, just yeah, my career. And 4 years is like 4 years. You know, it's like even 2 years is bad. A lot of the athletes would get 2 years, but 4 years. And it was like, what am I going to do? You know, they put out the fact that I'd had a positive sample before I appealed and before they put it out quite quick in a way. And that's something that I have said about today, that they shouldn't do it like that because people had already made up their minds. There are athletes out there where they test, they appeal or something happens and then their ban gets lifted. But people already made up their minds that that person is doping, and it's not always. There are some people that are actually innocent. There are some people that are innocent, and it's just a shame. And it is something that I have said strongly about, that they need to make sure that they don't put it out there into the open world until they are proper sure that they are proper positive, because people just make up their minds anyway. Once they know it's out there, that's it. Even if they've been found innocent, they will see them as a cheat, and it's really unfair to athletes. It can affect someone. I'm quite mentally tough. I think I've become more mentally tough as I've got older because I've been through all this hell. Really, I think I try and get the positive out of things, because otherwise I think my mental health would be like just down the pan. But I think I've tried to use it to help me in a way. I always try, and some people, and they say, I don't know how you've gone through that and you're still smiling and stuff like that, and it's just like, well, if I didn't, I would really struggle in life, you know. But it does really affect you mentally. It really affects you mentally because it did me anyway, and you lose like a massive part of your life that you've been working on. And it's about the fact that I became a role model. I was a role model in Boston to kids, and a lot of people knew me, and all of that just sort of went. I was a sports development officer, and I lost my job because I was seen, and that was hard because my managers, we still liked each other, but I lost my job because I was seen as a negative role model to young children. So, and my job was mainly, well, it was young children and adults, the different elements I was doing within my role as a sports development officer. But I was seen as a negative role model. So you end up losing. It's not just athletics. It's not just prize money. It's not just the fact of not competing. You lose part of your life. You lose part of who you are, and it's such a massive thing. It's like, well, what am I now? What do I do?
It's a huge part of your identity that just gets
Yeah,
stripped from you. So
yeah.
were you still keeping up the facade that you were innocent to your work? Did you ever come out and say it's accurate?
No, I was still saying that I was innocent. I think it was just my family. I can't remember who in my family, but definitely my mum. I was still, I said to her about what was actually happening to people, to like work and people that I wasn't necessarily close with. I didn't even really speak a lot about it. So in some areas, because I'd lost my job, but then after a while I got a new job. My managers knew about it, that needed to know about it, because I was very honest about it with them. But then people that were more my colleagues and not my managers, they didn't really know. They did. Some didn't know, or they didn't say anything anyway, because they didn't. Because what happened was I moved from Boston to Newark, so they didn't know me in Newark. They might have seen me in the papers and everything, but they didn't really know who I was. So because they didn't ask, nothing was said. Now, if somebody did ask, I said about my history and everything like that. But again, I was always saying about that I was innocent, really. So when I moved, it was a new start for me. Well, I thought it was until my second ban. Saw it as like a new start, and I just became, I just, yeah, I was just getting on with life, really.
So for the people that you had to be fully honest with, were you still keep taking the blame and keeping George's name out of it? And you were saying it was on you. You weren't discussing what he was doing at the side.
Yeah, so so for the people that I was speaking about, I was taking the blame, a lot of the blame, but the people that knew me very well knew that I shouldn't have been taking the blame, and it should have been George taking the blame, and they couldn't understand why I wasn't speaking up about it. And this is a mistake that I should have done, and I should have spoke up about it, which I did in the second ban. But they sort of, because they know the sort of person that I am, even though, yeah, I did take them, they knew it wasn't a case of, oh, I'm just going to start to take performance enhancing drugs. They knew there was a story behind it, and they knew that I was heavily influenced, and they knew that George was just getting away with it, and I was taking the full blame, and it shouldn't have all been me.
So when that positive test came back, in reality, it could have said any substances on there. You wouldn't have known exactly what they were. And in the end, it came back with testosterone and clenbuterol. Some of the side effects of clenbuterol are muscle cramps, increased blood pressure, insomnia, vomiting, shaking, particularly in the hands, nervousness, anxiety, headaches, and sometimes difficulty breathing. Did you experience any of those ones, and how was that dealing with that?
No, I would say sometimes I did have trouble sleeping sometimes, and the odd times muscle cramps, but I didn't really experience those symptoms a lot. To be fair, I'm not quite sure why. Maybe I don't know. I'm not quite sure why, to be honest. I don't know if it's because of something to do with the testosterone as well, the way it was working. Again, George was very knowledgeable in that sort of thing, so maybe that's why he put them together and somehow it cancels something out. I don't know. No, I wasn't. I mean, I would say what I did struggle with sometimes was, yeah, insomnia, sometimes sleeping, and the odd time muscle cramps, but that's about it, really. And sometimes with the muscle cramps, I just put that down to my training that I was doing.
And what's life like at a club level when you've been served such a big ban? You're in the newspapers a little bit. What is life like when you go in to train the next day and you're seeing people around the club, not necessarily friends, but people in your world, and you're going to meets and things?
I was at the time competing for Birchfield Harriers, and they was based in Birmingham, so I wasn't going down there a lot of the time. But my membership stopped with them. But when I did decide, oh, I just want to do a bit of running and everything like that, and I was going to when I was living in Boston, going to the Boston track. I knew that people were like talking about me, not everybody, but you could just see the odd time. I often heard, well, I always remember one time somebody shouted a man cheat from the one side of the when I was on the indoor track. And I pretended I didn't hear it, but I did. And it was stuff like that. Like, it was just a stranger. I don't know. I didn't see who it was, but I always remember hearing that. I used to have a Great Britain shirt, and it was hung up in the reception of athletics track, and that got taken down by I think it was by a mum of an athlete. The athlete, she wasn't a charge. I think she was in a I think she was early 20s, 22, 23. But I think the mum was like, why does she still have her Great Britain top up? Because what it was, I gave it to the track and I signed it and I says, thank you for all your help with everything. And it was one of my first GB tops. And I put it in a frame and I gave it to them and they had it hung up in reception and stuff like that changed because that got taken down and given to me. And I've still got that. And I did used to have it hung up, but before I moved house, but I don't anymore. Not at the minute anyway. But stuff like that was very hard to take because people just change the way they look at you.
And as you start your 4-year ban, were you tempted to just completely walk away from the sport altogether?
Yeah, I was so tempted to just stop running at all, because 4 years, like I said, is just such a long time. I just kept going. I wasn't training like I used to. I definitely wasn't training like I used to, but I still wanted to keep fit. But this is where it becomes such a mental challenge, and still doing little bits here and there. Because I still had, even though I'd been through all of that, I still had love for the sport. And that's the thing where I say it's always the best thing is to try and keep that passion and the enjoyment when things start to get serious, because you can't forget why you started that sport. So I wanted to run and I wanted to have that feeling of running on the athletics track and running fast, and I wanted to do the training and I wanted to push myself, and so I wanted still to do all of that. Yeah, and so I still continued, but just not at the quantity that I was doing it at.
And what was it like watching London 2012 from the sidelines? Because it was so monumental. If you were in England, the build up to it and the amount of medals that Team GB won, it was an extraordinary games.
Yeah, it was so incredible to watch, and I really enjoyed watching it. But it was very gutting to watch it as well. It felt very difficult to watch, especially when it got to the women's 100 meters, which I was hoping to be in, or 200 meters. So that's what I found difficult to watch, and difficult to, yeah, just to sit and watch the athletes, because I was thinking, oh, that's what I was working for. I could have been there. I might not have been there, but I possibly could have been there. Yeah, the atmosphere and everything just seemed amazing. It looked amazing. At the time I was quite down and I was thinking, I'm missing out on it. But at the same time, I enjoyed watching it because we put on such a good performance and we won. There was always that Super Saturday where we won a lot of medals and everything. Yeah, so it was still good to watch in any case. There was athletes, if I remember rightly, that I didn't know really well, but there was athletes that I'd spoken to, and I was wishing them well, as in not as in getting in contact with them, but I knew them because I've been doing different some sessions at Loughborough, which represents a lot of the GB team. I got to know some of the athletes, so I was still wishing and hoping that they was going to do well, and a lot of them went on to do well.
Mm. How did your relationship with George change during those 4 years? So at that point, were you like, okay, that's the end of, and you giving me tablets? I can't be doing this anymore. If I'm going to see out this 4-year ban, it's a long time. What were those conversations like, and how did your relationship change?
So we did end up breaking up. I can't remember when now, at what point, but yeah, so everything kind of just stopped. Definitely, I said no, I'm not taking any more performance enhancing drugs. I just didn't want anything to do with him. He went back to Greece and things changed for me as well. I moved to Newark and I got a new job in the NHS. I started working at Newark Hospital. He was still in contact with me though, the odd time. He would still sometimes try and ring me or Skype. He used Skype quite a lot, and he wanted to get in touch with me that way. So he was still sort of around, in a way, if that makes sense. Still in contact that little bit. and that's where again I should have shut it down and just stopped contact with him, because I'd started a fresh start and I was really pleased with my new job in the NHS, because I wasn't employed for like not long. I think it was about uh, I think it was something like 2 months, 3 months. It wasn't that long, but I had no income. I was unemployed. And then when I got my job in the NHS, I was really, really pleased. I thought, this is a fresh start. And I'd moved, I got myself a nice flat. Yeah, so it was a fresh start for me, really. And then, but then, and again, I don't know how it happened. George was in contact. I think he had moved back from Greece to Boston, I think. He was kind of to and fro from Greece. And then I think we were just in contact by phone. And I think I'd mentioned that I'd got a new place. And that, if I remember rightly, I was at work and he went to look at, because I says, oh yeah, I'm going to be living in such and such in Newark. And I think he went there to have a look. So I made the mistake of telling him where I'd be living or where I was living. And yeah, and then all of a sudden he just started turning up at my home. And then eventually we got back together again, which was because I thought, okay, maybe he's changed. And it was just ridiculous. And he hadn't at all. So yeah, we got back together again, and that's where things just went wrong again.
And did he almost instantly come into a coaching role as well with your athletic side?
Yeah, he did. So again, no one really knew him. No one really knew him in Newark. And I wasn't really training loads, but I was a little bit. And then he started to give me sort of advice and start to coach me. Started to go to the gym with me and says, "Oh, maybe you should start at that gym or that gym," and stuff like that. So he slowly started becoming influenced in like what I did, and I was letting him in slightly, and then it just went from there, really. It just stuff started to just start happening again, but differently, in a different way. Slowly found his way into my life again, really, and that was a mistake that I'd made.
And was that controlling influence or actual physical acts of violence as well?
No, it was controlling in a way. He just becomes sort of controlling in slightly in where I was, who I was hanging out with. Not so much though. Not so much. Not like last time. Not like last time. It was kind of not so noticeable. Not so noticeable, and it wasn't. If I remember rightly, not physical violence. It was more, okay, yeah, do this for your training. Make sure you do this. Make sure you do this. And then all of a sudden, because I stopped taking anything. I was very scared. I would say scared, actually. I was going to say that's not the right word, but I would say it is. I was scared at taking any supplement at all, even paracetamol. I didn't want to take anything, even if I was poorly. The only thing that I was taking was some vitamin tablets, and that's the only thing I was taking. And he knew that was the only thing that I was willing to take. So like your vitamin C or iron or something like that. So and they were just tablets from Holland and Barrett, and that's what I'd have in my kitchen, and he knew where they were. And that's when he swapped my tablets.
Okay, so we're in 2015. You're months away from your ban being lifted, and you receive a phone call to say that you've tested positive again. Talk me through that.
Yeah, so I was so shocked at like the fact that I tested positive, and this time I knew, or in my head I was thinking, well, I haven't taken anything. What has happened? And then I started to blame myself, and I was thinking, oh my God, it must have been some drink I had. But even with drink, I was just having like orange squash or something. I wasn't taking all these like electrolyte drinks that you can get made up and stuff. yeah, I was so confused as to what had happened, and I just couldn't understand it. And that's when I found out that they had actually UK Anti-Doping had sent me a letter to say that my sample had come back positive, and I hadn't received that letter. And George had basically ripped it up because by this time he was he was living back with me. We'd gotten back together, which was a big mistake. And yeah, and he had basically, I was doing an NHS course at the time. It was this Mary Seacole course. He ripped the letter up, and so I had no idea. And they were then wondering, UK Anti-Doping, wondering why I hadn't been in touch with them. I think there'd been a few days or a week had passed, and why I hadn't done anything about it. But obviously I wasn't aware of what had happened. And George says he didn't want me to be distracted because at the time I was about to hand in my final. The course that I was doing was for about 6 months or a year or something like that. And he didn't want me to be distracted in handing in my final paper. So like my project. And that's what he said. Now, at this point, if I remember rightly, when I got the phone call, George, I think he was in Greece, I think. So I was actually on my own at home, and I was very, very confused to what had happened. And so I was very worried that it was something that I had done. And I'd contacted George to say UK Anti-Doping have been in touch, and they basically said that because they come and tested me at home. I wasn't, because obviously I wasn't competing. They'd come and tested me at home, and that my sample had come back positive. How can that be? Again, he was being a bit shady, not saying a lot. And he says, I'm not too sure. I don't know. And that's when I thought, I think he does know something, because I know that I haven't taken anything. I was still a little bit doubtful. I was blaming myself because sometimes I'm thinking, is it something that I've eaten or drank that I just wasn't aware of? But I was so careful. And so what I did was, because he used to Skype some of the time, recorded him. And this is where it's like I'm a detective or something. But I was so wanting, I just had this feeling that he had done something. And I knew that if I had just said, oh, it's not me, it's George, I just thought people aren't going to believe me. So what I did was on my laptop, because he would Skype, we was on a call together.
It's a video call.
A video call, yeah, we was on a video call together. And I had my phone, I sat on the sofa and I had my phone in the background video recording, but you couldn't see my phone, my conversation with George on Skype. So all you could see on my phone, and I think I still have those videos. There was a couple of videos where the phone is on the sofa, on near a cushion. He wouldn't have been able to see it. So the footage isn't great. You can just see me speaking to a laptop, if that makes sense, like the back of me. But you can hear, the hearing is quite clear. So you can hear the conversation. That was the main thing.
No, you're all lovely and composed now. Honestly, what was this conversation like? Because he's in Greece, he's not with you. You've got one opportunity to catch him out. Was there much pre-game thinking of like how you're actually going to do it, or you just went into it and just rode your chances?
I didn't think a lot about what I was going to say or what I was going to do. But as the conversation got more and more, the more angry I was getting. And I'm not normally an angry person. I just went with it. And I thought, I need him to be honest with me. And what happened was, I always remember I said something like, if you're honest with me, I will think more of you, something like that. I made something up. I said something a bit ridiculous. But it was the case of, yeah, okay, just be honest with me. But I said something like, I will think more of you. And as I was saying it, I was swearing and I was getting more and more angry and annoyed. And I says, what has happened? And he then admitted to swapping my tablets, can't remember which ones there were, but I had some tablets in there. There was something like iron tablets or something. I can't quite remember. Swapping them, taking them out of the Holland Barrett tub and putting other tablets in there. So I'm there thinking, oh, I'm taking vitamin tablets, and I wasn't. And he had actually swapped them for clomiphene, which I don't really know about a lot about that at all. But he actually swapped the tablets for that. And so I just wasn't aware of what I was taking. And so he admitted it then, and he admitted to ripping up the letter. And he says, the reason I ripped it up is because you were doing your course. I didn't want you to be affected and everything like that. And also he didn't want to be caught out. But yeah, so he admitted it all on camera, and I had that recording. I was very angry. I was very annoyed. And then after that, the phone call, the video call on Skype ended, and I knew that I had the evidence.
How did you feel in that moment? Because on the one hand, it must have been bittersweet. Because on the one hand, you had evidence that cleared your name and showed that you weren't going crazy, because you must have been questioning yourself. What have you done wrong? Did you take anything? What were you doing? And then on the other hand, you've got a trusted coach and ex-partner admitting to not having your best interests at heart.
I had such mixed emotions. I was I just couldn't believe what he had done to me, really. So I was so glad that I got it on camera. I think that was the thing for me, getting that evidence, because I was just thinking, no one's going to believe me. No one's going to believe me. What if it was something I'd taken? But I just had this feeling it wasn't. So it was a case for me. It was like I was relieved. It was a sense of relief, and I was hoping that I would then get the help. But then on another hand, I was so angry because I thought, oh my God, this is all going to happen again. What is going to happen to me again? And I'd started a new job. I hadn't been in the job that long. So I had this sort of relief, but then worry, and then anger. And then I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. But this time it was very different. So this time George was in Greece. He said he was going to come back at some point. But this time I was actually on my own at home. So there was nobody in my ear telling me what to say so much, or what to do or anything like that. So it was a different situation. And this time, once I got offered welfare support that I turned down last time, I took the support. I can't remember the person's name, but somebody within UK Anti-Doping says, we have this support. And I took that support, and it was a lady that was so lovely. I don't know the word to use, reassuring. She was like, it's going to be okay. It's, don't worry, and everything like that. And I was like, oh, thank you. And so she was so lovely. And then also it was a case of finding someone to represent me. And I can't remember how, somebody recommended them from UK Anti-Doping, because I then slowly started to speak to them, because again, George wasn't there. So I slowly started to speak to them about what had happened. I think the person that I mentioned in the first one, in the first ban, that I says that I'm pretty good friends with now. I don't speak to him that much now, but he suggested a solicitor, an actual sports solicitor, who was based in Sheffield or Leeds. This person then got in touch with me, knowing the fact that I'd lost my job some months ago. I think it was over a year or so ago. So I didn't have a lot of money. I was still trying to build up my money, because at the time, George had used stuff like my credit cards without me knowing, and I'd got into debt. It was just the right mess. That was during the first, before the first ban. It was when we was together, and yeah. So he knew I didn't have a lot of money. He was very kind, because he knew that, like, even writing a letter, sometimes it can be like in the hundreds, maybe, I don't know, just to write a letter from him to UK Anti-Doping about what was happening. And he didn't really charge me that much at all. Like, literally, he didn't charge me that much at all. And he helped me. And we actually had a meeting with UK Anti-Doping in London. can't remember whereabouts now, but I always remember it was near St. Paul's Cathedral, because where I used to get the tube, I would always come out and see St. Paul's Cathedral, and UK Anti-Doping Office is around there, it was around there somewhere. So we met with them there, and I told them everything, literally from the first ban right up to the current day. I told them everything. And then I also had the video evidence as well, and which was very embarrassing because I was swearing in it and I felt very embarrassed. But I had it out on the table and I showed them all of that. And then my ban basically, you know what, I can't remember. I think I got a 10-month ban. I can't remember what happened now, but
I feel like
it
it was
got
2 years reduced
backdated.
to 10 months.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
it. I can't remember very
Not that
well.
I've stalked you online for
Yeah.
the last 2 weeks, but
my,
yeah.
my band got reduced, yeah, and because what they wanted, and this is what they wanted from the start. They knew that George was behind a lot of it, and actually, I think before me and George got together years ago, before he started coaching me, I think there was possible suspicions with the Greek anti-doping. I don't know what the body's called for them, but I think there were suspicions with the Greek authorities, if I'm honest. And then he moved to the UK. And so it was a case of the UK anti-doping knew he was behind a lot of it, but because I wasn't speaking out, they had to hit me with the 4-year ban. And then once I started speaking out, one of them, again, someone now who I'm friends with, working for UK anti-doping, he doesn't anymore, but he went to Greece to investigate George, and he then when everything come out with the second ban, he had to he had to meet with him. I don't know if two of them went. I can't remember now, but they met in Greece, and he had to be investigated. The UK anti-doping officer was only there for 1 or 2 days, and the UK anti-doping officer also met with, obviously, with myself, but also my mum and me. He just had to get all the story right and correct. So there was just some meetings taking place, and he got everything he needed. And from there, all the facts come out, and my mum didn't hold back. And obviously, she says everything she thought about him and everything, and yeah, and it all just come out, and that's where everything changed. Now George did come back after to the UK. I always remember he come, because the thing is, he still had a key, so he had a key. And this was the worrying thing, really, because I never actually got the locks changed, and people said I should have done, and I should have done. He let himself in, and it was something like 11 o'clock or midnight, and I think I was in bed or something. So it was actually pretty scary, and he let himself in, and he come upstairs. I think I knew he was coming back. I don't think it was a total shock, but I just didn't want anything to do with him. And he left after about 20 minutes, half an hour. And I don't know what happened after that. I think he went straight back to Greece, or he went back anyway at some point. So he come in the night. I think he knew that that was it for us, because we had got back together, and I was like, no, not interested, just leave me alone, and everything like that. And he actually he left then, and that's if I remember rightly, that was the last I saw of him. It wasn't the last I heard of him, though, because he was still trying to get in touch, even via Facebook, via Twitter. He was signing in as someone else, and I could tell it was him, though. It was so bizarre. And then he was sending me stuff. He would send me roses on Valentine's Day, and I was in a relationship with somebody else. So things like that was still happening. It was really weird. And he would be texting me and saying, I'm outside of your flat, and he wasn't there. But it made me think that he wasn't even in the country sometimes. He'd be like, yeah, I can see you from the living room. And it was really bizarre. It was really like a real mind, like,
Bernice,
mess
this
up.
could have gone so much worse, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could have gone so much worse. It was really, really bizarre. And that's the thing, it affected me mentally so much. And a lot of people, this is the thing, because it was all out in the press and everything like that in regards to the first ban. They didn't know all this background, but I didn't say anything about it. So it's it's my fault for not saying anything about it, but I kind of felt like I wasn't in a position to say anything. I didn't want to say a lot. And then with the second ban, again, a lot happened in the background again, you know. So yeah, but I was more open. I spoke up about it more. I got more help. I had more support, and it was the best thing was just speaking out, and that's why I encourage that now. It's like, you know, just talk about it. And I think it's that big thing of like, because George wasn't here, you see, he had gone back to Greece, and it was like I was on my own. And then the moment the welfare officer contacted me, I didn't have someone say, no, don't take that support, don't take it, blah, blah, blah. And I literally was like, okay, yes. And I think that was the turning point. And then everything just sort of changed. And then I found that because George made it out that UK Anti-Doping were against me, but they weren't. They were just trying to help me. So from the first ban, I thought, oh, they're against me and everything like that. But they really weren't. They did everything they could to help me, like literally everything. And because I'm part of the committee, I was asked to be part of the committee, and I was very like, really, you want me? But they always speak highly of me, and they want my views because I'm the only one on the committee that was banned, and I can see things in a different way or from a different angle that others can't, so they respect that. So yeah.
So if people don't take anything other from this podcast, one life lesson is, if you're in doubt, change the locks. Just change the locks.
Yes, change the locks. And it was something, I don't know why I didn't do it. Well, at the time I was renting, and I don't know, I didn't want the trouble, even though it's not trouble, really. It's like, oh, I'm going to have to get in touch with my landlord to change the locks or whatever, you know. But I just kind of thought, oh, it'll be fine. And it was
Again, easy
not.
in hindsight. Easy to
Yeah.
say now.
Yeah, exactly.
So you moved on to the next chapter of your life. And one of them, as you say, you're now on UK Anti-Doping's Committee of Athletes, and you're the only one on the committee that's actually served a ban yourself. So can you provide insights on these dark arts we've talked about that maybe other athletes are just completely oblivious to?
Yeah, so when I was asked to be part of the UK Anti-Doping Committee, I was just so shocked. But also, yeah, I was very thankful to be asked. Yeah, I can give things from a different angle, and I can recommend, like, I can give my opinion on things that they literally stop and listen to. There's about a group of 20 athletes on the committee. I'm the only one that has been banned. And I can give like my opinion on different things. I can also give my views. I told them that I felt strongly that athletes shouldn't be put out in the press unless it's for definite that they are positive, because even if they do get proven innocent, or even if there is something wrong, or something's been tampered with, or something happened with the sample, you know, people will make their mind up and see that they're positive anyway, even if they are innocent. You know, people will see them as not an innocent athlete. So I did give views on that, and I felt very strongly against that people be like put out so quickly in the press. And I think because I've said something, I think it has changed slightly, not just because of what I said. I think other people had similar views. I think they are more aware of that, because I says it can really affect people's mental health, and people, like, you know, you've got to be just so careful. Everybody's different. Like I says, I'm quite mentally strong now, I would say, but not everybody is. And so you would hate for the worst thing to happen, and you don't want anyone to be, because it does literally, it's like your world has been ripped apart, and you would hate to hear of somebody that is innocent and then they're trying to harm themselves, or at the worst situation commit suicide or anything like that. You just don't know. I've always also within the committee, there's been different situations where there sometimes are coach and athlete relationships, and actually some work. They don't all work, but some work. There are athletes that are married to their coach. I don't know what kind of come first. Maybe they got together and then that person become the coach. Sometimes it does work, but there's sometimes where the athletes, I do give my views that the athletes just need to be careful that they're not being just led astray, especially when you're young and you think you know everything and you don't really. So I always give my insights on that, just make them aware, make sure that they're aware what they're taking and where just to be careful of what they're taking, and to make sure that they're the only ones that have access to what they're taking, and it wasn't a situation like me and that tablets are getting swapped and everything like that. So I give like my whole insight onto everything of what I've been through, and they really appreciate that. I wasn't quite sure how what I've been through would be any help, really. But apparently, I've helped a lot of people, even I think people in America, apparently. So I think I know there was something that I'd done for a newspaper last, no, it wasn't last year. I think it was the year before. And apparently it's helped. They got hold of my story and realized that it was something that made them think again about different things. I don't quite know to what extent. I don't know if they was in a relationship with a coach, but apparently it's helped different people. And I always said, as long as I can help one person, then that's good for me, then I really I'm grateful of that. I'm grateful of that, because I just hate for anyone to go through what I went through.
Mm. You've gone full circle from, in your younger life, you're a role model to the youth as they were coming up. You've gone through the various bands, and now you're coaching yourself and you're on the committee. We can't say anything that George put you through was anything but completely wrong. However, now as you're a coach, do you have any new insights into how that coach-athlete relationship, and you start to live vicariously through that athlete, how there can be something that goes around that you maybe encourage them to push themselves as far as they can and even beyond that?
Yeah, so I think as I think as a coach, so in a way, George has shown me how not to be in a way as a coach, because he did really push me, but he become very like just had such a short fuse with me sometimes. And I was always someone that proper listened and tried different things, different exercises, made sure I was doing things right. But he was just become very angry with me, and it took the enjoyment out of it. So for me, like with athletes now, I coach sometimes once, sometimes twice a week. I was coaching up to about 5 times a week, but with my job now within the NHS, it's I don't have as much time. So I coach definitely once a week and sometimes twice a week. And even the athletes that I see, there's uh, there's some like they're so capable of going to a high level. You can just tell with certain athletes that that um they have that talent. um they just shine that little bit more than others. Not saying others don't, but you can tell the ones that stand out that can possibly get somewhere. So it's about sort of like I encourage them. I make sure, again, speaking to the parents. So this is where this is really important. It's about speaking to the parents and making sure that they are on board and are willing to have that support and be taking them, if they can, to where they need to go, to whatever destination. So yeah, I'm always encouraging, motivating, but also making sure that they enjoy it. And I think that's the main thing. And it's about, yeah, pushing yourself, but also making sure that you enjoy it as well. And it's just about being you. There's no, it's not about taking performance enhancing drugs. It's not about taking, there's no, there's no easy way. And if there is, you'll more than likely get caught anyway. So it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it at all. And it's not the right way. And so it's about, okay, enjoying it. And sometimes, because I do run a bit now myself, I try and train a bit. I'll run with them, and yeah, and they like that. I don't know why, but they like it. I think they're still quite shocked because I'm still quite quick. I'm not really, really slow. I'm not as quick as what I used to be, but I can run. There's some coaches that don't at all. I would say that I'm one of the only ones, because I train at Newark, that do run with the athletes on the odd occasion. And when I do starts from the blocks, they're like, "Oh my God, you're actually quick." I'm like, "Yeah."
Still got it.
I'm not bad.
Have you ever heard of the concept of ikigai?
No, don't think I have.
So if you imagine 4 concentric circles like a Venn diagram, and the intersection where they all meet is called your ikigai. And so the 4 circles are what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, what the world needs, and what you can get paid to do. Now, in your previous life, you may have thought that would be a professional athlete, and you enjoyed your sprinting, you were good at it, the world needed it to an extent, and you could potentially get paid for it if you're a professional or through sponsorships. Looking back at it now, do you think that coaching other people and other athletes could actually be your purpose and your calling, because you're good at it, you can get through to them, you've seen the bad side of it, so you know what they'll take from it, the world needs it, and you can get paid for it. Is it like looking at the 2 chapters of your life? Can you see that maybe just because one door's been shut, it's actually opened up another interesting door that you could walk through?
Yeah, that's it. I like that way of thinking of it, actually. Yeah, I often do think maybe, you know what, maybe because I'm thinking when I'm younger, oh, yeah, I want to be a professional athlete and everything like that. I always used to look up to athletes like Denise Lewis, who I have met actually, and I couldn't stop staring at her. I thought, oh my God, she's amazing. So, I was always thinking, oh, I want to be like a professional athlete and everything like that. But maybe it just wasn't. It just wasn't. Obviously, it just wasn't to be. And I do think now, because people say, oh, you're very good at coaching and you're very good at the way you put things. And even yesterday, actually, I had a parent contact me about, he said to me that my daughter joined the group because of you and another coach, not just me, because of, has joined Newark KC because of both of you, and she wants to be in your group on a Thursday. Is that okay? And all this. And I thought, oh, that's really nice, And I think for me, I used to, but not so much anymore. I used to do I used to coach other sports. So in terms of rugby and football, and I used to have some athletes, so the odd rugby player or the odd footballer. I never advertised, but it used to be word of mouth, and they would basically, a parent would speak to another parent and be like, oh, there's this athlete at Newark called, not athlete, well, coach called Bernice, and she might be able to coach your son or daughter, whatever. And they would get in touch with me, and often they wouldn't, I'll be coaching them for sometimes 6 months or a year, but they wouldn't, it would really help because I'd help with their sprinting aspect of their sport. And that was the main thing, because some people think in football as well, any sport, you just run. You run from A to B and that's it. And it really isn't. There's so many different elements to help in regards to like the explosiveness, in regards to like when you break down the running cycle, like how you do that, and about just so many different aspects, the plyometric side of it and everything like that. And so once I was with some of these athletes and I got them learning how to run efficiently and how to run fast, but it's not about running from A to B, it's how you do that to run fast from A to B. They were so, it just felt really rewarding. And the parents would then say some of the athletes that had not a lot of confidence, they would sometimes say, you really brought out that confidence in my son or in my daughter. I often got that a lot. It really helped them. It did really
Mm.
help them. And now sometimes they would go off from playing rugby and get to Leicester Tigers, or they'll get to like quite a high football club. Yeah. So their parents sometimes would send me videos and be like, oh, this is how they're getting on now. And this is, I want to show you how he sprinted in the rugby game. And so it was really rewarding. And there was always really positive about that. And that made me feel good because I'm helping them, you know. And I think I mean, yeah. And even yesterday, actually, I had a conversation at work and they actually mentioned, because sometimes I'll say a little bit about the fact that I coach, but not a lot at work. I don't. Sometimes I say, "Oh, I've got to coach because I'm coaching. I've got to go because I'm coaching tonight," and they're interested. They're like, "Oh, what do you coach?" and everything like that. And even I have had conversations before where people see me, they can tell that I coach because with how I am at work, and they say that I'm encouraging, and they're saying, "Oh, you know, it would be really good if you could. I would really like you to help me in my development at work. You have this sort of, you have like the patience and the good communication, and things like that." And I feel like I'm boasting, but I really don't mean to. But it's just like I think those sort of traits in coaching that I have, they help me with my work as well, I find, because
Mm.
yeah, I think it does. I think it helps me in like my professional working life as well. So so yeah, so I think maybe I was maybe more for teaching and coaching and giving people helping people learn different things. So
Mm.
maybe that was maybe what I was meant to do. And you know, I will just say when I first got into athletics, into when I become older before my ban, I wasn't sure about coaching at all. I was like, oh, I don't know about that. And I don't know why. I think it was I found it hard. I think because I was still competing to get my head around coaching as well. Some people can't do both, and I think I'm one of those that struggle to, because when you compete, you have to be quite selfish, and it's a lot of it is your time. You have to go out nearly every night and be training and stuff like that when you're competing. So to coach, it's again you're giving up quite a lot of your time. And so for me it was either one or the other. And so I'm not competing at the minute, but I might do at some point because I keep getting asked. I might do the odd competition, but I find that I have more time to coach. My like in the evening, I'm sat sometimes doing training schedules. Where if I was competing, I would be training or I'd be in the weights room, I'd be doing so. But I'm looking at other athletes and thinking, right, how can that person improve for that competition in a few months' time? Because they need to work on that. And I'm thinking, right, I need to work on their speed. I need to work on their acceleration. Actually, they're not getting their knees up high enough and stuff like that. So it's like, even when I'm not at the track, it's like a lot of my time is going into another athlete, if that makes sense. And
Mm.
so it does take up a lot of your time, but I like investing my time in other people. So yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, I don't want to take you away from the NHS because I'm sure that's important work as well, but something to consider.
Yes, yes.
um, Bernice, thank you so much for your time and your honesty today. It's been eye-opening to say the least. I've got a few quick fire questions for you, and then we'll call it a day and you can get on with your weekend. But thank you very much again for your time.
That's okay.
What book, podcast, blog, or resource would you give to someone if you wanted to encourage them to live a good life?
Possibly. I read a book some time ago now, some years ago, and it was Michael Johnson's book, and it was called Slaying the Dragon. It was really good in regards to about his life and about how he got into athletics, and I think it mentions about when he did the world record and about different aspects of his athletic career. But I think it makes you think about just about family and friends and everybody that you need around you to make like it's not just all about you, if that makes sense. So it really sort of opened my eyes into like um yeah, just about how just about the support needed to lead a good life and to be successful in what you want to be in or where you want to be, whether that be sport, whether that be work, whatever it is. It's about how it just highlighted like the building blocks of life, really. And that's how he got to where he was. I can't remember where he did it now, but where he had the gold athletic shoes, the spikes, and about I think it was about him doing the world record. It was always one of the good books that I really enjoyed reading. So yeah.
Can you remember what the metaphorical dragon was that he slayed? Was it
No,
a mental thing that he had to
yeah,
get over, or?
I think it was. I think it's because he was somebody that was so it's called Slaying the Dragon, and I think it was about the pressure that you're under because he's somebody that become very well known. He was someone that had a very unique running style. He used to run with his back arched and very upright,
Yeah, I
and
remember.
a lot of people will remember. And then he put pressure on himself with these gold spikes that he wore. I don't know if he was given them, I'm not quite sure. Um, and yeah, and I think it was about getting over that sort of mental hurdle of like, okay, yeah, I can do it. I am good enough to do it. And it speaks about that in life. And I found it a good book, a book that I read years ago now, but I always found it a good book. And Michael Johnson is great anyway. He's someone that I haven't met, would love to meet. And he's on the BBC the athletic competition sometimes in as a presenter, and so many people also they say how he speaks so well and is honest. And I
Mhm.
think that's the key thing. He's just honest. If he says someone's not run well, he won't go about it. He'll just say, yeah, that wasn't a good performance. But he says it in a nice way. So yeah.
Mm. What was your biggest light bulb moment where you learned something about yourself?
It was after I got through my second ban, unfortunately. I think I realised I'm stronger than what I think and than what I think I am. My mum always used to say that I'm too trustworthy, which I was. And she says and she always used to say you don't see the bad in people. And that's something that has always stuck with me and I've learnt from. Yeah, I would say after my second ban, I then saw I should have seen it on the first ban, but the second ban, I then thought, yeah, everyone isn't nice. Even though I knew everyone's not nice, but it's like I learnt more and I sort of become more mentally strong. And that's when I was like, you know what? I need to look after myself more, and I need to realize when someone is taking the mick out of me and stuff. So it was then that I kind of stopped being taken for a fool so much. And I just had to really turn it around because, like I said, if I didn't, I would be in a really dark place with everything that I've been through. And it's like, okay, let's make this a positive and let's help people that want to be helped or that I can help. And let's make it make it a positive thing for you, and it's made me definitely a stronger person mentally, definitely.
Do you think it has jaded you slightly and put your guard up when you meet new people?
Yeah, it definitely has. It's definitely I'm more aware of people, also just to make sure that they're, because like I says, I can be very I used to be, not now, but like just easily like led and just too trustworthy. So now I'm just so much more aware. But I was always my mum always used to say that to me, that I was I just didn't see the bad in people. But now it definitely opened my eyes a lot more, that you think someone's being really nice and really they're not.
What keeps you up at night these days?
I think sometimes work. I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to do that tomorrow, or I've got to do that. Sometimes I think the worry, like I says, I've recently, not well, a year ago now, had a bereavement, but sometimes it's like I wish good health, not so much for me, well, for me, but for my friends and family. And I just, yeah, and I sometimes hope that everyone's okay, and they are, but it's just like I just hope that I just wish good health for my friends and family, really. And yeah, and I just sometimes I'll be thinking, I hope we're all okay, and that and I know we're all supporting each other and everything, with everything that we go through. But sometimes if a family member or a friend hasn't been very well, I'll just make sure, and I'll be thinking about them and wishing them well and things like that. So sometimes I think I what keeps me up at night is just making sure I think about work, because I work in a very busy hospital, and then sometimes I'm sometimes thinking about my friends and family and just wishing them that they're okay, because I have a very big um I have a big family, some in Australia, in Melbourne, some in London, and some more locally in Nottinghamshire, some in Manchester. So yeah, so it's just hoping that they're all well. So yeah.
What's been your best mistake?
My best mistake, there was actually, this is probably one of the things that got me into athletics. So there was a mistake so my very first run that I did, and I was 8 years old, I actually started walking. No, I ran the race, but then I didn't know where the finish line was. And I always remember walking for about, it must have been a good 2 or 3 meters, and I still won the race. And I always remember my parents, everyone saying, because I thought I'd finished, I was like, come on, come on. And I was only 8 years old. And I won it still. And I was like, okay. And then I started winning again. And that's when I think people thought, oh my God, she started walking and then started running, and she still won. And that's when I think part of how I got into running. I think that was at Grantham. I always remember it was at, I think, Grantham Athletics Track. And I always remember everyone going, come on. And
Was this where your dad told you to lie and
yes,
tell him you're 9 years old and then you
yeah,
can compete? But
exactly.
you were younger than the kids as well.
Yeah, and I was 8. And he said, just tell them you're 9. So I did. I was like, I'm 9. And so I went into the race, and then I just didn't really know. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I didn't know where the finish line was, because it wasn't 100 meters. Because when you're younger, I think I did 80 meters, and I just didn't know where I was meant to finish. And, and, and yeah, and so that's when I was like, you still won. And that's when I got put into other competitions and stuff like that. So it was a massive mistake. I even can now picture doing it, but it was, I suppose, the best mistake, because it got me doing more competitions and more into athletics.
And you learned to keep an eye where the finish line was.
Yeah, and I learned, yeah.
If someone wanted to take one step towards living a good life, what would you tell them to do?
I would tell them, be healthy, and definitely communicate. I would say communicate, actually. Yeah, because that's something that I did that has really helped me. And when I didn't do it, things were awful. But when I did speak out and I communicated, even if it's just it doesn't necessarily have to be with a family member, or a very close friend. Just I think as long as you open up to somebody, it gets the ball rolling, and then other things start to just slot into place. So I would say, yeah, communication, because when we all stop talking and everything just stops, I just find that just everything just comes to a standstill, and we can't express how we are, and we can't express problems that we're having or stuff that we are happy about, and oh, is this right, should this be happening? So yeah, definitely communication.
Good. And finally, who in your life should we talk to next if we wanted to learn how to live a good life?
Who to talk to next? So I would say, I've had very, so before George, I've had very good coaches. Before George, I had very good coaches, and but I don't know if they coach anymore. But they were all so experienced, and I think they've seen a lot. They've just seen a lot over the years, but I don't quite know what they're doing now. But I would say that they would be able to say how to lead a good life. I'd say that they've seen a lot more of what's happened than me, a lot more of what's happened in sport than what I have. Yeah, I would say they would know how to lead a good life. But also, if there was ever the chance to speak to anyone, I would be so wanting to speak to someone like Michael Johnson, because I bet he's seen some stuff, and I bet he's led. Oh, actually, yeah. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. But he had a stroke. I remember he had a stroke, and as you can see, I'm very much into him. But he he come back from it. He changed his life and everything. Not a lot of people knew he had a stroke. I think it's going back 2 or 3 years ago now. But I know, I follow him on Twitter, X now, and he had to change his life. He had to learn how to walk again properly and stuff. And I think that he's someone that I always really look up to, and I always think he would know. Obviously, I don't know him, but he would be someone, if I did know, that I'd be like, oh my god, yeah, speak to him, because I bet he's led such a good life, or he would know what, yeah, just how to lead a good life. Because I think he's very thankful for everything he's been through right now. He's had, yeah, like some ups and downs, but I know he had a stroke, I think about 2-3 years ago. So yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, Bernice, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Just before we leave you, is there anything else that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you'd like to leave the listeners with?
No, it's been really good. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you very much for coming on. I'm sure people will appreciate your honesty and the detail that we've gone into today. It's been a lot longer than I bargained for, but I have to say thank you for that. It's been fascinating from my side.
No, thank you very much, and thank you for your time and for speaking to me in the way that you have. You was excellent. So yes, thank you.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Just before you scroll on, please do hit the like button and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Cheers.